Good morning and welcome back to the Planet Doug podcast for Saturday, March 8th. I think it's about 10 o'clock in the morning, and the Planet Doug podcast is back and it's almost live. I'm hoping to post this video today, the same day that I record it. We'll see how that works out. The podcast, aka Morning Coffee with Doug, aka Doug's Video Journal. Welcome. Got a few things I wanted to talk about today. The first thing on my mind, of course, is what I did this week, and this whole week has been pretty much occupied with my hiking trip, my second hiking trip to Bukit Dinding, in which I did the Mini-Tahan Trail. So I want to talk about that a little bit, about the trip itself, and then the video filming, and then the video editing afterwards. I think there's a few interesting things there to touch on. And some YouTube vlogger stories that I've been ignoring for a while. I watch a few people that are traveling around the world by bicycle or by scooter or however they're traveling, and I like to talk about their videos a little bit. And some interesting podcasts that I've watched. We'll see how far I get in my long list of topics, including pop culture items. And hopefully all of these things will be divided up neatly in the podcast with chapter titles, and then you can use the chapter feature in YouTube to jump from one to the other. So yeah, let's get started with my trip to Bukit Dinding. A couple of weeks ago, I stumbled across a set of hiking trails in Kuala Lumpur on a hill called Bukit Dinding, which I've learned is Malay for wall hill. And I went there without knowing much about the place. I read about it, of course, and I looked at their website, and I pored over Google Maps, and I got as much information about the place beforehand as I could, but that never is a substitute for seeing a place in person. So even though I felt like I knew a lot before I went, everything was still kind of a surprise. And my first hiking trip was a big success. I did the Kazumi Otai Trail and the Kazumi Sentai Trail, and I basically did a loop through these trails. I went to a couple of viewpoints, the Setiawangsa viewpoint, KLCC viewpoint, and then up to the highest point, the peak of the hill, and they have some communication towers up there. An amazing hike, really challenging, much steeper and more difficult climbing than I anticipated. And I met a lot of people on that day. There were probably 100 other people or more on that particular trail. And there were a couple of points where we really had to slow down to go down some really steep inclines, holding onto a rope. And then there'd be actually like a backlog of people would build up, waiting for the people ahead of them to complete the descent before it was their turn to get on the rope and go down. So I had a lot of opportunities to chat with people, chatted with a couple of people on camera, and I put that into the video. Really good day, really amazing experience. So I wanted to go back, and there was another trail there called Mini-Tahan, which is supposedly was a much more difficult trail and something you don't take on lightly. The full trail, 7.2 kilometers long, and it was supposed to be pretty rough, a lot of climbs up and down, a lot of steep inclines, things like that. So I decided to go back to do that, and right out of the gate, things didn't really work out that well. I don't know, I was just so tired all the time, and I got a little bit ill the day before my plan to go. I thought everything would be okay, but then I got ill, so I did my usual thing, which is I just stopped eating. I had breakfast on the day before, and then I was quite ill immediately afterwards, and ill basically for the whole rest of the day and the night, but I just stopped eating, so I had no lunch, no dinner. And then the next morning I woke up to go to the Mini-Tahan Trail, and I was still feeling ill. And I didn't have any breakfast. I didn't have anything to eat. And to be honest, I was that close to not going. Even the omens were against me. I talk about this in the extended cut of my Mini-Tahan video, where It was just one of those mornings where I was so tired, I wasn't even aware of what I was doing. I was trying to get ready here in my hotel room, and I'm stumbling around, and I forget what it is I'm doing. I'd go into the bathroom to get my toothbrush to brush my teeth, but I'd walk out of the bathroom holding my hairbrush. And I'm like, why am I holding my... I can't even remember what I'm in. I'm in the middle of doing something, and I switch gears and do something else, and I forget what I was trying to do in the beginning. The day was just not coming together. I wasn't feeling awake. But I thought, well, this was like 4:30, 5:30 in the morning, really early anyway, and I thought, well, by the time I get there, I will wake up, so let's keep going. So I did. I went out into the world, and my plan this time was to start shooting video right at the trail. I wasn't going to record video traveling to the hill. I was only going to begin the video right at the hiking site. So that's what I did. And then even getting there was more tiring and more exhausting than my first trip. The escalators were all broken in the LRT system, so I had to walk down all the stairs. And just going down the stairs tired me out. I was breathing hard and my legs felt a bit fatigued just going down the stairs in the subway system. So that wasn't a very good omen. And then the trains were really crowded because I left a little bit later this time. So I was sort of edging into rush hour. Trains were full, trains were crowded. And for whatever reason, instead of the big 4-coach trains, only 2-coach trains were running. So everybody was jamming into trains that were half the size that they normally were. So they were even more crowded. I don't know, just things were not coming together. But I soldiered on, and I got to Mini-Tahan, and I did sort of an introduction at the entrance to the trail. And there was nobody else there. I saw 2 women hanging out near a car, and the way they were just sort of hanging out, I thought they were preparing for the hike. So I thought they might be on the trail with me, but they went off in some other direction. So I saw no other hikers at all the entire day. Not on the Kazumi trails, not on the Mini-Tahan Trail. When I exited from the trail, I didn't see another human being anywhere near Bukit Dinding on the trails anywhere at all. So that was kind of the theme of the day in a way, because since I was the only person on the trail, I had to go through all the spider webs, because during the night, as any hiker knows, spiders are very industrious creatures, and they'll build their webs across the trails. There'll be like a tree on either side of the trail, and then they put a web in between them, and they build them overnight. And then the first hiker on that trail gets the pleasure of walking through all of the spider webs, and you get spider webs all over your face. So I had to do that, and I was going really slowly, very, very slowly. And I was going so slowly that if there had been any other people on the trail, they would have caught up with me and passed me. But nobody did throughout the entire day. And I was on the trail for 6 hours, 6.25 hours in total. Yeah. And I didn't do the entire trail. It was pretty obvious early on that I didn't have the energy to do the whole trail, and I didn't have the time to do the whole trail, for a couple of reasons that I'll explain in a minute. And I decided to do maybe half the trail, because at about a halfway point, you could exit. There was like, I didn't realize it at the time, but they mark that point with signs that call it an emergency exit. So if you're on the trail and it turns out to be too much for you, you don't have to stay all the way to the end. Because I'm pretty sure if you do that half and you're struggling, which a lot of people would, you're not going to be able to complete it. You wouldn't have the physical energy to complete the second half, I don't think. In any event, it would be very, very hard to do. Getting very cold in here. Turn off the air conditioner. And it turns out that halfway along, the trail comes all the way down from the top of the hill to road level, and there's a fence and a gate there. And then if you want to bail on the hike, you can just go out the gate, and then you can walk back to the trailhead through the streets. And I very quickly decided that that's what I was going to do, and in the end, that is exactly what I did do. And the main reason I was going so slowly is that to make the video more interesting and to make the hike more interesting, I decided to set up some challenges. And I based this on my 5 snack challenge. But this time I decided to look for mushrooms, for fungi. So I decided to look for 5 different mushrooms. I called that the 5 mushroom challenge. And I knew that there was a special flower in the park called the black bat flower. And this flower has been adopted by the organization Friends of Bukit Dinding as their logo. And on my Kazumi hike, I didn't remember seeing, or at least I didn't remember noticing, a black bat flower ever. I wasn't looking for them, and I guess I never noticed them. And I decided that on this hike, the Mini-Tahan hike, I was going to keep my eyes open and locate a black bat flower, because I had the idea that they were quite rare and it would be very difficult to spot one. So then I turned that into a 5 flower challenge. So I would look for 5 different species of flowers. And then I decided to, if I happened to come across any garbage, I didn't think I would, if I saw some old food wrappers or a water bottle or something on the trail, I was going to pick it up, put it in my knapsack, and take it out of the trail. And I was going to look for 5 pieces of garbage, and I called that the 5 garbage challenge. So I had 3 challenges to look for a total of 15 different items. And if you start thinking it through, how long would it take to do that? Because I wanted video of every one of them. So it would be 15 separate video sequences and setting up the camera, taking the video. And let's say it takes you 5 minutes to shoot that piece of video. Multiply that times 5. Right there, you've got over an hour of video that you've added to your day and added to your YouTube video. I didn't really do the math in my head before I started. If I did, maybe I wouldn't have chosen 3 different challenges, because that's a lot to do in terms of filming and then the editing afterwards, and then the length of the video just starts to expand. So what I often do with these videos is I have my extended cut, the Planet Doug extended cut, which has almost all the video I shoot from beginning to end, and then I try and get it down to a more normal sized video. And I don't know what the proper technique is on YouTube for this, but what I've been doing is I take the condensed version and I make that the focus of Planet Doug on YouTube. So that's my main video. That's the one I think will be more popular. That's the one that will be viewed more often, that will get the most engagement. And I post that one first. And then after 2 or 3 days, then I throw up the extended cut. But I think I usually turn off notifications for the extended cut, because it's just there as sort of a bonus video. When I set up the Patreon, my idea was to make the extended cut exclusive only to Patreon members. But then as I was setting up the Patreon, I realized that was not going to work out, because your Patreon could remain quite small, and with a very small sample size, it could be that nobody would ever watch that video. So now you're spending an entire day making and posting a video that 0 people will ever watch. And yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So then what I decided to do was make the extended cut available as a normal Planet Doug video, like every other video, so anybody can watch it, but I would give it early access on Patreon. So members or the inhabitants of the ocean planet would get early access to the extended cut. And I originally set early access at 7 days on Patreon, but I also realized that 7 days is too long. It's just, yeah, it's way too long. Nobody watches the extended cut from Patreon anyway, so all I'm doing is posting a video that nobody is going to watch, and then waiting 7 days to make it public just confuses everything. So then I lowered it to 3 days. So Ocean Planet inhabitants get a 3-day early access to the extended cut, and then it goes public, and then everybody can watch it. And who knows, maybe it's better to post the extended cut first. Because to be honest, in terms of expressing who I am and the nature of the Planet Doug YouTube channel, the extended cut is closer to my own personality because, for example, in this case, the extended cut contains all the challenges. Because if you include all the challenges, it ends up being over 2 hours long. There's 30 minutes of hiking, 30 minutes of sort of background information about Bukit Dinding and the hike, and then over an hour of challenges. So if you include the challenges, the video has to be like 2 hours and 15 minutes long. So when I tried to take the extended cut and make it less than 1 hour, I had no choice. I had to remove the challenges completely. And the challenges were the heart and soul of the video and the hike experience itself. So it's like I keep shooting myself in the foot. So I ended up posting the condensed version yesterday, and the condensed version doesn't really contain the heart of the experience, because I did include some close-ups of the black bat flower and the mushrooms, but there's no mention of the challenge. There's no mention of the garbage challenge. So in a way, the less engaging video for me is the one I'm posting first. But the only reason I did it is because the more engaging video is way too long, because it's over 2 hours long. But anyway, that's how things go on Planet Doug. I don't really have to tell the whole story of the hike because the 2-hour extended cut contains pretty much everything. So like behind the scenes stories, there's very, very few behind the scenes stories that aren't already in the video. The only stuff that isn't in the video might be things like how I had to climb down all the time. And I kept the cameras running during those experiences because I would put a GoPro at the bottom of the trail to film myself as I climbed to the top. And then, of course, when I get to the top of the climb, my GoPro is down at the bottom. I got to go back and get it. So all of that is not in the extended cut. I thought about putting it in. I was gonna make like the super extended cut, where I have the two hours and 15 minutes of video, but then there's another hour video of me just going back down, like setting up the cameras and then walking back down the trail, getting the camera, going back up again. Because every climb in the hike, I did it 3 times, all the way through. So I am saying that the trail kind of defeated me. I didn't complete the whole Mini-Tahan. It was too difficult, too tiring, and too long. But most of that was because I was shooting video. And I probably only did like 2.5 kilometers of hiking on the trail as the crow flies. But you can triple that because I went up and down everything 3 times. So I had to go up to the top, back down to the bottom, and then back up to the top again. And at every point, I was disassembling cameras, rearranging cameras, putting cameras away, getting new cameras out, constantly changing settings. And it turned into quite a major project. And if I included all of that in the video, that would also be the super extended cut. And I do have all that video, because when you think about it, I'm at the bottom of the trail. I take one GoPro, my main GoPro is on this Jaws Flex clamp, my GoPro, it's the one I'm filming with right now, and I put it on here, and I clamp it to a tree branch, aim it up the trail, And then I'm hiking to the top of the trail, filming myself, but then I have to come back down. But while I'm coming back down, it's still filming. It's not like I have super stretchy arms where I can reach to the bottom and hit stop recording. I can only stop at recording when I finally get all the way back down. So my descent of every single climb is all on video, but I didn't put any of that in the actual video. And even when I go all the way up and then all the way down and then all the way back up again, I have another GoPro, this one. This is my GoPro Hero 9, and I have it around my neck like this. So it's here filming all the time. So I have all the video, and I have multiple versions of all of that. But yeah, in terms of my camera gear, so I had this around my neck, I had this in my hand, then I had a tripod. I'm using the tripod right now for this GoPro because I made my life even more complicated, because on this trip, I put the GoPro at the bottom, climbed to the top, and then I took another GoPro, sometimes the one around my neck, and put it onto a tripod so that I could film myself from that perspective going down and then back up again. It turned out that was a complete waste of time, because I thought I could take the video of me climbing back up, like the second climb, and I could take that video and cut it into the other video. But it turned out I couldn't do that, because in the original video of me climbing up, I'm talking. So I have all this audio. You hear me, my voice talking. But in the video, my second climb, I'm not talking. So suddenly you're hearing my voice, but you're looking at the video and my mouth isn't moving. So then it started to get weird. It's, oh, actually, yeah, I can't use any of that video. So anyway, that was a kind of a waste of time. But anyway, yeah, I had this around my neck, this mounted in the trees, and I had my Rode Wireless Go microphone. This is my Rode, and I have a 3 microphone set. So the receiver is mounted on the main GoPro, and then I had one Rode Wireless Go on a cord underneath my shirt, and then I had a third Rode Wireless Go that I could mount in other places just to catch ambient sound of birds or waterfall sounds, anything like that. And if I ran into other hikers on the trail and I wanted to talk to them, and I'd ask them, hey, do you mind if I ask you some questions and put you in my video? Then I have a second microphone, I put it on them. So I had all of that going on in terms of the base video and audio, but then I also wanted to get close-up video from the challenges. So the 5 mushrooms and the 5 flowers, you're using a GoPro, and then you're not going to get very nice footage because it's such a wide angle, and the flowers and mushrooms are quite small. So I also brought along my Olympus. This is my big camera that I love so much. So this is the Olympus OM-D E-M5 Mark II, and it has some disadvantages for vlogging, as I've discovered. So I don't use this very often, like for walking around and talking into the camera. It's sort of too big and heavy for that, and the lens isn't wide enough. So I use my GoPro for that. But if I ever need to get like B-roll, this is the camera that I use. And you have to think a lot to use a camera like this. I mean, just look at all the buttons. There are function buttons, controls, and dials everywhere, on the front, on the back, on the top. And then all of these buttons are programmable. And that is a big advantage for a camera like this. But it also takes up a lot of your brain power, let me tell you. And yeah, so there's a lot going on with this camera. There's a few things I really like about it. One is that I don't know if every camera has this these days, but it has the ability to punch in on a digital zoom. So what I've done, if I'm taking video of a flower that's 10 feet away or something, of course I zoom all the way in. This lens goes to 70 millimeters in full frame equivalent. So it's a 70 millimeter totally zoomed in. But then I have this button here on the top. It's programmed to punch in 2 times. So all I have to do is click this button and it instantly punches into 140 millimeters, which is a significantly greater zoom lens. So what I do is I zoom in at 70 millimeters, I get the mushroom lined up dead center on the screen, and then I hit this button and it punches in double the zoom distance, and that's how I get closer. And in terms of focusing, I tried to use autofocus because that's the most convenient, but that's probably the biggest drawback to this camera, is that in video mode it won't focus. It uses what they call contrast detect autofocus, and using that focusing system, what the camera is designed to do is to constantly focus beyond the object and then before the object to kind of dial it in. So it's constantly going in and out of focus as you're shooting video. It just goes blurry, then sharp, then blurry, then sharp, and it just doesn't really work that well for video. But it does have manual focus. So I have another one of these buttons set to what they call peak. And when you turn on peak, what it does is it highlights whatever is in focus. It highlights it with these bright, you can set the intensity of the colors and things like that in the camera. And I set it to its highest level because I need as much help as I can get, especially out in the daytime. And then, so when something is in focus, the edges have this bright, sparkly light all around it. So as you're going in and out, focusing in, you know you have it in focus when it has this halo of bright lines and bright lights all around it. And they call that focus peaking. So I have focus peaking turned on, and I have that mapped to another button here. So when I'm trying to get something in focus, I turn on focus peaking, and I use the manual focus ring. And then I'm usually looking through the viewfinder, because the LCD screen is just too bright out there. You can't see that clearly. So I'm holding it up to my eye, and I have another button programmed to switch back and forth from the viewfinder to the LCD screen. So this button here flips back and forth between them. So I'm sort of getting it lined up, and then I click to viewfinder, then I move in. And so I have all these buttons pre-programmed for punch in zoom, peaking, and for viewfinder LCD. And there's one other very important function on this camera, which I really like. I use it all the time. It has this little switch on the back. Not many cameras have something like this. And it has 2 positions, 1 and 2. It's like a lever. And then in the up position, you can set a certain mode. And then number 2, down position, is mode number 2. So you can switch back and forth, mode 1, mode 2. And I have it set up so that mode 1 is for photography. So if I want to take a picture, now I'm in photo mode. Aperture priority, the shutter button takes pictures, etc., etc. I have everything set up how I like to take pictures. And then when I want to take some video, all you do is, and now all the settings switch over to video mode, and I've switched the shutter button and the video record button in video mode. You can do that with this camera as well, which is really nice. Because I complain all the time about camera companies trying to sell us what they call a vlogging camera, when really it's just a photography camera that can also shoot video. And one of the things they do is the video button will be hidden over here. This one with the red circle on it, that's the video record button. And it's really hard to find. Like if you're taking pictures, you're holding the camera, this is where your finger goes, right there, because you're taking pictures. And then if you want to take video, you're moving your finger and you're like, okay, where is that button? You're trying to find it. And it's really hard to feel because it's so small and it doesn't really have any kind of, anyway, it's like flush with the surface. You can't really feel it. And I end up pushing all these other buttons while I'm searching for the video record button. It's really annoying. But now in video mode, I switch it so that the shutter button starts and stops video recording. So if I click into photo mode, this button takes pictures. If I go to video mode, now this button starts and stops video recording. So that's kind of how I use this camera. So it has a lot of amazing features for something like this. But yeah, it takes a lot of time because I can't walk around with this in my hand. I'm already walking around with a GoPro in my hand and another one around my neck. I can't walk around like this. So even when I'm going up and down the trails, I take this one and I actually attach it to the pocket of my pants. So it's actually dangling upside down. And when I do that, I have both hands free, and then I can hold on and climb up, and the GoPro is not interfering. And I'm taking video with my neck mount GoPro. So I can't exactly walk around holding this. So every time I saw a new mushroom, well, I have to stop for quite a long time. Stop, talk about the mushroom. I'm taking video with that GoPro, with this GoPro, going on, talking about the mushroom, the flower, whatever it is I'm seeing. And once I've got all of that, which is the main video, then I turn off all my GoPros, get out my knapsack. I have to open my knapsack, get out my camera case, take out the Olympus, take off the lens cover, turn it on, flip out the LCD screen, go over the settings, make sure I've got everything how I want it, make sure there's not some sort of weird thing going on. And then you shoot the mushroom video. It takes a long time. Once you've zoomed in like at 140 millimeters, it's hard to keep things lined up and keep it stable. This camera has really, really good stabilization. So the last time I did this hike on the Kazumi Trail, I had some trouble with stabilization. Something weird was going on where if I had IBIS, this camera has IBIS where the sensor is stabilized physically inside the camera. I turn on IBIS and it has digital stabilization. So if you turn on IBIS, you get a certain amount of stabilization. Then you turn on digital, it combines it, and you get even more stabilization. And that's good. But I discovered when I was doing that, the digital was kind of jerky. I was trying to follow these macaques that were walking around up and down these hydro wires and on the ground. And I'd be trying to track the macaque, and then the digital stabilization would start to lag and the video would jutter. It would like freeze for a second and then catch up and then freeze and then catch up. There's like a conflict between the IBIS and the digital. And I thought, well, that's weird. And I eventually decided, well, that must be how it works. So I turned off digital and said, okay, if I'm moving around a lot, now only use IBIS. So on this day, when I did the Mini-Tahan, I started off using only IBIS, but the stabilization wasn't strong enough. It was close, but I wanted a little bit more, so I turned on digital, and it worked perfectly. So there was no more lag, no more stuttering. So either I was imagining things, there was a mistake, a glitch, I don't know what it was. But anyway, on Mini-Tahan, I had IBIS running, and I had digital stabilization running. And when I edited the video in DaVinci Resolve, you can add even more stabilization. So in the editing program, I could select a clip and then ask the editing program to stabilize it even more. So I ended up with some very stable video of all the different mushrooms and the flowers and things like that. So yeah, it was a very complicated day in terms of shooting the video and using my camera gear. And I hadn't done anything like that in a long time. Like shooting video on a really difficult hiking trail. So I had to refine my methodology and keep adjusting things, trying out new things, and I slowly dialed in a proper technique for doing something like the the 5 mushroom challenge or the 5 flower challenge. That was really, really interesting. That was also really tiring and physically challenging, because getting close to the mushrooms, getting close to the flowers, now you're getting off the trail, and now it's very, very hard. You're on a very steep slope, and you're trying to hold your balance while holding on to all this camera gear, and then trying to get the camera lined up and then keeping it steady. And you really had to use your leg muscles and your, I guess what you call your core muscles, because you're often like way off on an angle. You're like here and you're holding on here, and you got the camera and you got the mosquitoes and the bugs in your ears. You can feel things landing on your legs, starting to bite you, and you're like, I'm like, who do I think I am here? Like a National Geographic specialist being paid $80,000 to get these shots. It's like, man, this is way too much dedication for what I'm shooting. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it. And I did fall badly once. And that's when I was using this camera and shooting mushrooms on a log. And it was quite a steep and slippery area. And I was holding on to this camera, and then I slipped. And I talk about this in the extended cut, that I've trained myself now that if I ever fall, I mean, the human instinct is to just let go with your hands. Whatever you're holding in your hands, if you feel yourself falling, you have an instinct just to open your hands to brace yourself so you don't hit your face and do real damage. You know, you block your fall using your outstretched hands, and you drop whatever you're holding. It's like a deep, deep instinct in our bodies. And I've been training myself to ignore that instinct. So I could feel myself going down. And when I was on this log, I'm slipping, and I was like, oh, I'm going down. And then I just held on to the camera, and I thought, well, my body will take the punishment because I don't want the camera to get hurt. And I landed right on my hip, right on a piece of wood, a sharp, like a thing sticking out from the log. And I got a big, big dark bruise over on my thigh. I'd show you, but it would get my video an NC-17 rating or something. But yeah, I've got this big bruise over here. It's going to take a while for that to go away. But I saved my camera. Yeah, a lot of my camera gear got covered in mud during that day. The GoPro now, I can see, is still covered in mud. I just haven't had the time to clean anything off. So yeah, it was quite an adventurous day in terms of shooting video. There was one thing about the physical experience of the hike that I started thinking about, and I don't know the answer to this. And this question comes from how tired I was. And I blamed that on the fact that I didn't get any sleep. I have trouble sleeping, so I was tired before the day even began. And then I blamed it on the physical exertions of all this video taking that I've been talking about. That took a lot of my energy. I mean, to give an example, I think that section of trail that I completed, I think if you were moving fast, you could probably do that hike in an hour, I'm guessing. But I was on the trail for 6 hours, so that gives you an idea of just how slow I was going and how much time I spent just looking around for mushrooms and flowers and shooting video. But I was really, really tired because of all the energy output that came from shooting video. But I did end up wondering whether, had I had something to eat, I would have felt better. Because I've often wondered about this. I often don't eat. It's kind of a habit I have. If I'm on a cycling trip, for example, I don't start the day with breakfast. Ages ago, I rode my bike across Canada, and of course on a trip like that, I was camping out almost every night because hotels in Canada are so expensive, and there's lots of wide open land in Canada. So I would find a place, put up my tent, and then you go to bed really early, and you wake up before the sun has come up, before dawn. So I would wake up in the morning, pack up my tent, pack up all my gear, and I get on the bike, and I just start riding just as the sun is coming up. So I haven't had anything to eat. I don't start the day with breakfast. And I might ride my bike for 3 hours, for 4 hours, and then at around 11 or something like that, maybe earlier than that, then you stop and have something to eat. And during those hours of cycling, I've had nothing to eat, but I feel fine. I have lots of energy. I don't feel like I have to put food in my stomach to get the energy. I always believe that my body has energy reserves. Do you know what I mean? Like, the human body is not like a car and a gas tank. If the gas tank is empty, there's no gas in it, the car doesn't move because there's no way to produce energy. But the human body isn't like that. It has energy stored. So you don't have to have food in your stomach to get energy. Your body just breaks down fat or gets energy wherever it gets it from, and you can go for hours and hours and hours, and your body is still working just fine, and you haven't had anything to eat. So I'll often, even when I'm bike riding in Sumatra on previous trips, there have been many times where I rode the entire day. I woke up in the morning, had nothing to eat. I rode my bike the entire day until the end of the day when I arrive, check into a new hotel, take a shower, get unpacked, and then I go out and have dinner. And I've had no trouble during the day. Like, I didn't need the food in real time to produce energy. And I'm wondering how true that is. Like, when I did the Mini-Tahan hike, I didn't eat. I had no food in the morning. I had no food all day. I had no snacks. But I wonder if I had breakfast, like even just grab a couple of sandwiches. Like, you don't have to have a huge meal, but just grab something along the way. And had I eaten that, would that food in my stomach have been turned into real energy that my muscles could use in real time? And would I have felt a lot better during the hike? Would I have not felt so tired all the time? I honestly don't know. Like, in terms of the actual biology, you take your physical state right now. Like, right now my stomach is empty. It's 11 o'clock in the morning now. I've had no breakfast. I woke up this morning at whatever it was, 7 o'clock. I've had nothing to eat. And how I feel right now, what if I had had breakfast? Would that food turn into energy that my brain could be using right now to talk to you? I honestly don't know. I've always been under the impression that no, it doesn't really matter. That you need the food over time, but you hear people, for example, on a hike, they say bring snacks with you, and that during the hike, if you break out the snacks and have something small to eat during the hike, you'll get a burst of energy, like putting gas in the tank of your car. Oh, you suddenly have more energy because you just ate something. But in terms of actual biology, I don't know if that's true. Like, how long does it take for the food you put into your stomach to then be turned into energy that your muscles and your brain can use? Maybe it takes 2 hours for that food to be turned into energy. Or does it happen in 20 seconds or 5 minutes? I don't know. Anecdotally, based on my experiences in life, it takes hours for that food energy to become available. It doesn't show up instantly as soon as you eat it. I don't feel better. I don't feel more energetic the minute after I have something to eat. Anyway, I could be absolutely wrong about this. I'll have to ask AI what AI thinks about this. Speaking of AI had a big role to play when I finally got around to editing this video, and that was a lot of fun. AI, man, AI is just blowing my mind. It really is. But to start from the beginning, I don't think I have a whole lot of behind the scenes topics about editing this particular video. It took a long time. I talked about just how much video I had. I had video from 2 different GoPros and from my Olympus, and the 2 GoPros were normally shooting simultaneously, but sometimes they weren't, and the video clips ended up being quite a bit of a jumble in terms of the timeline. So here is my hike from A to B, and then I'm shooting video, but I'm shooting video with so many different cameras, and then when it came time to edit them and put them together, it really was like a giant jigsaw puzzle to figure out the order in which to put in all the video clips. And then I had to find the clips that overlapped, and then I have to sync the audio and the video, and then you have to change the, mute the audio of one and on. It's a painstaking process. And I went on the Mini-Tahan hike on Tuesday, and I got back here. I can't remember what time I got back, about 3 in the afternoon or something like that. And I started working as soon as I entered the room. And despite how tired I was, the second I walked through the door, I just basically stripped off all of my wet and muddy clothes, took a shower, plugged in all of my batteries to recharge everything, sat down with my laptop, took out all of my memory cards, and I had to copy all of the video files to my laptop. And then after they're on my laptop, I make a second copy, which I now keep on this amazing device. I have the portable SSD drive, and so I have a second copy, a backup copy of all the original video here. I used to make a third copy on another hard drive, so I'd have 3 copies of the video, but I don't do that anymore. Maybe it was just overkill. But now I'm pretty happy because with my new laptop, it has a 4 terabyte SSD drive, which is really, really fast memory. So I have all of my video in memory on my laptop, and then I can copy it from the laptop to this at lightning speed. This is super fast. The laptop is super fast, and then I can copy to here. If I tried to copy to like an external HDD, a hard disk drive, that would take like probably 2 hours just to copy the video files, and I can't sit around for 2 hours waiting for that to complete. So these days I only have 2 copies, one on my laptop and then a backup there in case anything goes. I guess I technically have 3 copies because I still have the originals on all the memory cards. So in terms of having a backup, I think I'm pretty well covered, having 3 full sets. So I do that, and then on Tuesday night, I started the editing, which is basically opening up a new timeline in DaVinci Resolve, and then I've got all of my folders, GoPro 1, GoPro 2, Olympus, smartphone, graphics. I got all the folders laid out, and then one by one, I just open up that folder, copy the video clip, folder 2, copy, line them up, sync them up, mute the audio, clip them at beginning and end, add the next one, then the next one, and then you just settle in. You just settle in for however long this is going to take. And I worked until 11 p.m., midnight, something like that. And then on Wednesday morning, I woke up early because I met up with Daryl, Wander Eats Daryl. We arranged to meet up for breakfast. So I took a break from the video editing in the morning. I went out with Daryl, we had breakfast, we had coffee. I told him all the stories about Mini-Tahan hiking. And then in the afternoon at about 1 o'clock, I think, I came back on Wednesday. And then I just worked nonstop until midnight, from 1 until midnight, just editing and editing and editing. And that was Wednesday. And then Thursday morning, just woke up, went back to editing. And I think at some point Thursday morning, I finished the extended cut. And that included all the video, my title cards, graphics, music, the end credits that I put on my videos with all the location and music, and the names of all of my amazing Patreon members, the Crunch Club, Factoid, all those things. So it's a full, completely done, exported video, the extended cut. That's what I did first. and then I uploaded it to YouTube, and then I took the extended cut and I tried to figure out, okay, how can we make this shorter? And then I just started at the very beginning of the extended cut. I save it, of course, the project as a new copy, condensed version number 1, and then I just start deleting things, removing things, cutting, making things shorter, and trying to get it down to as short as I possibly can. And that's when I realized the only way I can get this video under an hour is to remove the challenges completely. So all of that is gone. And then I realized the video felt kind of empty. If I had only the hiking, it was like, I don't know, it doesn't quite do it for me. And then I realized that I can keep some of the video close-up of the mushrooms and the black bat flower. I can keep that in the video with music playing, but I have none of the challenges surrounding it, right? So in the extended cut, I turn to the GoPro number 1 and I'm saying, oh, flower challenge number 2. I just saw, I think it's a new flower. Let's go take a look at it. And then I show the video, show the flower on video, and I'm talking about the challenge, finding a new flower, all that stuff. I got rid of all of that. But then when I took the close-up of the flower with my Olympus, that I kept. And I think that made the video more enjoyable. I didn't explain why I'm shooting mushrooms, why I'm shooting flowers, because the structure of the 5 flower challenge is gone, and the 5 mushroom challenge and the 5 garbage challenge, all of that I'd stripped away. But I realized if I kept some of the close-ups, that kind of makes it interesting. So that's what I ended up doing. And after I did that, kind of a light bulb went off, and I thought, you know what? If I ever do another hike again, like in the near future, I don't really need to do a challenge to get the mushrooms and flowers, like to get the nature video. So what I can do is just go on a hike, and then if I see anything interesting, a flower, a tree, a mushroom, a bird, an insect, then I can break out the Olympus, get some close-up of that, B-roll basically, and then I can just put it into the video. Like, I don't need the challenge structure to explain what it is. I can just shoot a bunch of interesting nature video and just put it in with music to break up the hiking video. So that was my idea. So anyway, I'm working on the condensed version, and then I got to the point where the extended cut was uploaded to YouTube. And then it takes YouTube an hour, 2 hours to process the video, like process it up to 4K, and then it needs time to make the captions. So YouTube's computer listens to what I'm saying and makes captions, and then times it in the video. So if you turn on closed captions, CC, you see what I'm saying. But the YouTube captions are terrible. They're not accurate, they're not punctuated, there's no proper spelling, it doesn't have proper names. They're really inaccurate and incomplete. But what I learned when I did the Kazumi hike is that if you take the YouTube captions, copy and paste them into an AI, you can tell the AI, oh, these are captions from a YouTube video. Can you please spell check it, add punctuation, and add proper spacing for paragraphs? Can you basically take these captions and make them better? The AI does an unbelievable job. It's incredible. I cannot believe how good they are. And I was experimenting. I started off, of course, with ChatGPT, because ChatGPT is the big one that everybody uses right now, that is in the news, and I have it on my laptop and on my phone. I have it everywhere. But I ran into problems with ChatGPT because the captions for a 2-hour video, It's a lot. It's a big, big document. And then when I put it into ChatGPT, it would only do a little bit of it, and then it would stop and say, oh, we did it for you. Would you like me to continue and do the rest? And I would say, yeah, do the rest. And then it wouldn't. It would just glitch and it would stop. So the only way I could use ChatGPT was to take the captions and divide them into chunks, about 1,400 words, copy, paste. AI does its thing, copy, paste, go back to the captions, get the next 1,400 words, copy, paste, let AI fix it, copy, paste, and I had to assemble it bit by bit by bit. And this took a long time. And then I decided to try the new one, DeepSeek, from China, and to my amazement, DeepSeek worked better. I put the whole massive document into DeepSeek, and DeepSeek did the same thing, but it did double. Like ChatGPT did 1,400 words at a time. DeepSeek would do over 3,000 words, just go and go and go and go, and then it would stop and say, would you like me to do the rest? Would you like me to continue? And it gave you a continue button. So all I needed to do was click on the continue button. DeepSeek starts thinking, and then it does the next 3,500 words, and it stops and says, continue? And I go, yes, continue. So DeepSeek was much, much faster than using ChatGPT. So this time, when I did it for Mini-Tahan video, I went straight to DeepSeek. I didn't even bother with ChatGPT. I threw it into DeepSeek. The one thing I'll say is I think ChatGPT did a better job in terms of making paragraphs. DeepSeek tended to put big chunks of text and throw it into one big paragraph that should have been divided into different subjects. And ChatGPT had a better idea of how to organize it, but DeepSeek was so much faster. And the amazing thing, and I guess I never thought about this, but this is the advantage to an AI, is that the AI can access the internet. So for example, in the YouTube video, I talk about something like, oh, I took the LRT from Masjid Jamek station to Sri Rampai station, and then I walked to Bukit Dinding, and I did the Kazumi Otai Trail. So all of those names, the YouTube captions, I had no idea what to do. So when I say Masjid Jamek, it's just gibberish. And then I say Sri Rampai, it's just gibberish. Bukit Dinding, Kazumi, Mini-Tahan. The YouTube captions had none of that in it correctly. But you put that into an AI, the AI is paying attention to the context. And when it is fixing the spelling and the punctuation, it's not just looking at the caption, because the caption is just gibberish. Nobody would know what that means, but the AI is paying attention and says, oh, this guy, he's in Malaysia and he went from here to here, so he probably rode on the LRT, and now let's go look for the names of these LRT stations. And the AI knew I went from Masjid Jamek to Sri Rampai station, and it knew how to spell them, and it knew I was talking about a hiking district, a hill, and it went looking, and it found Bukit Dinding. So, oh, that's probably where he went. Oh, that's Bukit Dinding, that's probably where he went. And oh, these are the trail names. Kazumi Otai, Kazumi Sentai, Mini-Tahan. It knew everything. So I don't know if you follow what I'm saying here. I gave the AI only the YouTube captions, and the YouTube captions were gibberish. There's no way to look at the caption and know what it meant. But the AI looked at the entire internet, looked at the context, and figured out probably what I was talking about. And it put in all the right names, all of them. It absolutely just blew my mind how powerful these things are and what they can do. It was unbelievable. So once DeepSeek finished, I had a nearly perfect transcript of the entire video, and then I could copy that transcript and paste it into YouTube Studio and replace the captions. So I deleted the horrible captions and I put in the AI generated transcript, and then YouTube put it into place. So it's an amazing feature what AI was able to do. And it could do one more thing, and I'm going to talk about that over, I need another cup of coffee, and my throat is wearing out, so I need a break here. Coffee number 2. Nice. So I was talking about AI and how I used it to transform YouTube captions into perfect transcripts using DeepSeek and ChatGPT. But interestingly, once you have a good transcript, well, you don't even need the transcript, to be honest. You could use the YouTube captions to do this. You can also ask the AI to do everything else for your YouTube video. And I experimented with that this time as well. And the results were, frankly speaking, astounding. My brain can hardly comprehend how this happens. But what I'm talking about is that I asked DeepSeek to write my video title and video description based on the transcript. So I'm essentially telling the AI, okay, here's this 20,000 word transcript of a video, a YouTube video. Can you read that document, figure out what the video is about, and then write a good, effective, engaging, interesting YouTube title and video description that is optimized for SEO and keywords. These are all the things you're supposed to do, and which I never do because I just can't handle that sort of stuff. And that's what I did. I copy and pasted the entire 30,000 word document into DeepSeek, and I wrote a very simple prompt at the top. I can't remember the exact words, but it's basically what I just said. I said, can you please, I'm very polite when I talk to AIs. I say please and thank you all the time. And I say, oh, could you please read this transcript of a YouTube video and write a video title and a video description, and I want them to be interesting and engaging and exciting, and I would like you to use to optimize it for SEO and keywords. That's all I said, and then within a minute it did exactly that, and it did such an amazing job. It blew my mind. I did this for the extended cut first, and it wrote a video title, and to be honest, the video title and the language overall was a little bit heightened from the normal Planet Doug tone. For example, I kept it almost word for word. The video title that it suggested, I put it into YouTube. I thought, well, let's see how it works. And it basically said something like conquering the Mini-Tahan Trail at Bukit Dinding, and then something about going into the jungle, and then something about mushrooms and flowers and the challenges and things like that. So it basically took everything that was in the video, put it into the title quite neatly, put in emojis as well, and it said conquering this difficult jungle trail. And of course, if I'm writing my own title, Planet Doug title, I'm not going to say that I conquered the trail. That's more of a overly dramatic, because I would say I was defeated by the trail. Honestly, that's the honest thing. I was going to hike the entire Mini-Tahan Trail, but I only hiked half of it, or maybe even 1/3 of it, because I was too tired and I ran out of time. So technically, I didn't conquer the trail conquered me. So the title and the fact that it calls it a jungle trail, I was sort of looking at that going, is that truly accurate? Because you're in the middle of Kuala Lumpur, you're not in the jungle. And yet, that hill, Bukit Dinding, you are in the jungle. I mean, look at the video. It's a jungle trail. So I thought, well, don't be so, talking to myself, I was saying, don't be so tightly wound. Just loosen up a little bit. Okay, you did finish the trail. It is a difficult trail, and I did it. So yeah, I conquered this difficult jungle trail. I went, yeah, I can let that slide. And I put it in as the full video. And then what I was more impressed with was the video description, how well it was written, for one thing, and how detailed it was, because it picked up on everything. The challenges, for example, it just didn't say, I mean, if I wrote my own description, it would be, oh, I went to Bukit Dinding and I went on the Mini-Tahan Trail. It was really cool. I mean, at that point in the editing process, I'm so tired, I can't even think straight. That's all I could manage. But DeepSeek wrote this amazing video description and broke down everything that was interesting about the trail. And then it broke down the challenges. Like in this video, we have so many challenges, the 5 mushroom challenge, the 5 flower challenge, and then the 5 garbage challenge. It really focused on that, about how my trip through the trail was all about cleaning up the environment and bringing garbage out of this pristine jungle setting. I mean, it just went on and on and on. And then it included stuff about Patreon. It included everything with emojis, beautiful display with bold and highlights and italics and nice organization. And it did all of that within a couple of minutes. It absolutely blew my mind. And I almost kept it exactly as DeepSeek wrote it. All I needed to do was go copy, paste, and I'm done. It was that well done. But I did clean it up a little bit, and I removed a few things. It had your typical paragraph where it said, if you were amazed by this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and all that typical YouTube cliche stuff. And I deleted that paragraph because I don't like the whole like, comment, describe business for some reason. I draw the line there. So I deleted that paragraph, but I left everything else almost exactly as it was, because I thought it did a good job, and the job it did was so much better than anything that I could do myself. So yeah, really interesting experiment with AI. Though at the end, to be honest, I was thinking, if AI can do all of this, what is my purpose now in this whole equation? It did a much better video title than I could do, faster, much better video description than I could do, and faster. It created a perfect video transcript within minutes. It would, for me to have done that, would have taken 10 hours or more at least to make that transcript. To go from the captions, oh man, it would have taken longer than that. To clean up the captions, write it out in good English with proper spelling and punctuation and spacing, it probably would have taken me 2 days to do that. The AI did it within minutes. And it was just sitting here working on my laptop. I was watching it work while I was enjoying a cup of coffee and watching YouTube videos on my tablet. All I had to do was occasionally go, oh, continue. Another 3,500 words. Oh, continue, until it was done. It was amazing. And if it can do all of that better and faster than me, I mean, why doesn't it make the entire video? I mean, if it could do it, if I could put all of the video onto my laptop and have an AI embedded in my laptop and say, please take this video and make a YouTube video that is 25 minutes long, and the AI could do it for me, why wouldn't you do that? And of course, that is what the future is going to be like. An AI can already edit its own video, but I don't have the capability to upload all of the video to the AI to let it do it, if you know what I mean. But if you had a way to feed all the video I shot to an AI, it would make a far better video than I could ever make, faster. It could do it in minutes. It's absolutely astonishing. The world is never going to be the same again. It really isn't. Yeah, it makes me feel quite unsettled when I think about it, because my brain can't even comprehend the implications of what AI means and what it's going to do in the future. It's a technological train that is roaring into the future, and it's almost going to be impossible to keep up with it. But yeah, very interesting experience. Like I said, using AI, very simple steps, YouTube captions to AI transcript into video description, all done by AI. That was really unbelievable. And of course, I played around with making YouTube thumbnails. It can make better thumbnails than I can make. I'm absolutely horrible at thumbnails too. But yeah, very interesting experience using AI. The two mad explorers, Luke and Naomi, are still on their way to Shanghai. They set off to do a bike ride from Bangkok to Shanghai, and it's about 4,000 kilometers. And I've been watching all of their videos and enjoying them in a Planet Doug way. They're very different people from me, and their style is completely different. Their attitude towards cycling is completely different from mine. So in terms of their cycling experiences, the things they do, the things they talk about, their style, their attitude, they're all completely different from me. So I'm not watching the videos from that point of view. I'm watching them mainly to see someone else doing something completely different. And their story has been quite interesting. And I'm not going to go through all of the videos one by one in a lot of detail, because there are too many of them that I've been watching lately. They rode through Thailand, then into Laos, and they've already exited from Laos, and then they rode through Vietnam all the way to Hanoi. And the timing I'm not entirely sure about, because you can go to Instagram and look at their Instagram reels, and in their Instagram reels, they're already in Hanoi. And yet, in their YouTube videos, they're still at the border between Laos and Vietnam, if you see what I mean. So it was sort of, I saw one of their videos, and in this video, they were talking about quitting. Both of them, Luke and Naomi, had had enough of cycling. They found it so difficult, so unpleasant, so unrewarding, that they were ready to call it. And they made a whole video about that. I'll talk about that in a minute. And they're basically saying, I don't know if we're going to keep going. We're probably going to quit. And Luke in particular was pretty serious about that. It sounded like, yeah, they were going to throw in the towel, and they just weren't going to bother continuing on. But then when they posted that video, you could go to their Instagram page, and you see that they're already in Hanoi, and they talk as if they have their bicycles with them. So obviously they did continue cycling. So it's kind of weird, this whole social media world. And Instagram totally confuses me. I don't understand Instagram reels, where they are, how you access them. I find Instagram so confusing. I need an AI just to help me understand Instagram and how it works. I guess I'm that dumb. But yeah, on their cycling trip overall, their difficulties began on day one, pretty much, because they started riding from inside Bangkok. And any megacity like that is going to be hard to ride a bike in. So day one was tough. And then from there, they didn't really go into the countryside. I mean, one of the big advantages of cycling, it's a slow method of traveling. That's my approach to it. It's a way that you can travel slowly, go into the countryside, and control your pacing. You're totally free to leave anytime you want, go anywhere you want, and stop anytime you want, as opposed to if you're like riding by bus or something like that. But they didn't really do any of that. So they basically, from the beginning, they drew a straight line from Bangkok to Shanghai and said, this is our route. And if you do that, trying to find the shortest way to get somewhere, you're going to be on the biggest highway systems. So they started off in Bangkok with busy city streets, nearly impossible to ride your bike there, very uncomfortable, very stressful, physically, mentally, emotionally overwhelming. And that's how they started. And then when they got out of the Bangkok metropolitan area, they were still just on major highway systems and massive trucks thundering by all the time. And I experienced that when I was in Sumatra, when I rode to Bukit Dinding. But at that time, as far as I could tell, I didn't even have a choice though. That road I was on was the smallest road. There was no way to get off it. So I was riding on the one main road in Sumatra that had all of the trucks thundering by. And I was in a worse situation than they were because their highway system was actually a big one, multiple lanes, like 3 lanes on each side with a divider in the middle and then sometimes even a shoulder. My road in Sumatra was just a 2-lane narrow thing with no shoulder, with just huge trucks, more trucks, I think, thundering by very close to me. So I have a little sense of how difficult it is to ride on a highway with a lot of trucks. But they didn't need to do that. They chose to ride on the main highway system because it gets them where they want to go faster. So that was basically how they were thinking of cycling. They were thinking of it not as a way to make their trip better. They were approaching it with the attitude of doing something physically challenging. So right out of the gate, they were talking about how it's going to be horrible, how it's going to be awful, how it's going to be nightmarish, how it's going to be difficult. And for all the first 7 or 8 videos, those words were the main words that they used every single day to describe it. Luke in particular said, oh, this is awful, this is horrible, this is nightmarish, this is terrible. All day long, that's all they talked about was just how nightmarish it was to be riding their bikes. And they kept doing it because in their mind, what they were doing was overcoming the barriers. It's going to be physically difficult. Emotionally, it's going to wreck us. It's going to destroy us. It's going to be horrible. It's going to be unpleasant. It's going to be uncomfortable. And yet, we will persevere and we will overcome all of these difficulties. And my attitude is exactly the opposite. If I'm riding a bike somewhere and I find myself saying, oh, this is nightmarish, this is horrible, this is awful, well, as soon as I hear those words coming out of my mouth, whoosh, I'm putting the bike in storage and I'm just continuing on by bus or by train, or I'm just going to stay where I am and stop traveling, because I'm not doing it to prove how tough I am. And they seem to be embarking on this ride to prove that they can do it, that they're tough enough to do it. They set themselves up for a challenge and they needed to overcome the difficulties. So that was sort of their attitude from the very beginning. And this ties into with the later story. There was one video where Luke was talking about all the people who were saying, to my eyes, nobody was saying anything negative, but he picked up on comments where people were telling them, you're doing this wrong, there's no way you're going to do it, you'll never make it to Shanghai, you're going to quit, da-da-da-da-da. And he was keeping a dossier, and he said on video, it's like, all you people who are telling us we can't do it, and there's no way we can do it, I'm keeping a list of all of your names and all of your comments, and when we get to Shanghai, I'm going to shove it in your face. When we get there, I'm going to go to my folder where I have all of your comments and all of your names, and I'm going to tell you directly, you were wrong, we did do it, and on and on. So this was sort of the attitude they brought into it. And then, as I said, it was difficult for them right out of the gate. And then whenever they got to what I would consider a slope, like not even a hill, but a slope, they had to get off their bikes and push. And I don't know this for sure, but I have a little bit of experience with bike touring. And when I looked at the bikes that they purchased, they bought really inexpensive, the cheapest bikes they could find just about at Decathlon in Bangkok. And it's not geared for touring. In my mind, a touring bike is not about going fast, it's about going slow as possible. And you want what I think of as a granny gear. So with a granny gear, you want a big chainring. No, I got it exactly the opposite. On the front, you want the smallest chainring you can get, a tiny, tiny sprocket on the front for the pedals, and then a huge one on the back, as big as you can get on the back. As small as possible on the front, as big as possible on the back, and that gives you the maximum amount of torque so that you can go up the steepest hill and you can keep pedaling. So, you're pedaling and you're going zzz, and yet the bike is going at like 5 kilometers an hour, and it just gives you the leverage, it gives you the torque to be able to keep riding uphill, even though you've got a heavy bicycle with a heavy load. But their bike didn't have that. They don't have proper touring gearing. So as soon as they got to the very first slope, they couldn't pedal. They just did not have enough torque. So they had to get off their bike and walk and push it. And then I was thinking, man, when they get into the mountains of Laos and Vietnam, if there are, depending on their route, if there are a lot of hills and mountains, they're basically going to have to walk their bike the entire time because there's no way they're going to be able to ride. Like even when I was in cycling to Bukit Dinding, and my bike is a lot heavier than theirs. My bike is really heavy. My gear is really heavy. I have a big, heavy rig that I cycle with. And then the steepest hills going up to Bukit Dinding, I just dropped it down into first gear and then just 5 kilometers an hour. You just slowly go uphill. Like even the steepest hills with switchbacks, I could keep riding. I could just ride and ride and ride, and just hours go by. And what you do is you just settle into almost like a Zen-like rhythm. You're listening to your breathing, you're just pedaling, and you just try to be aware of your surroundings. You're listening to everything, you're looking around you, looking at the beauty, looking at the human activity. You're just sort of in the moment. That, for me, that's the key to enjoying anything, really. But bike touring in particular, hiking in particular, when I did the Mini-Tahan Trail, you shouldn't be focused on finishing the hike. It's like, oh, I can't wait till this hike is over. If that's your attitude, then why are you even doing the hike? And that's why I really like the mushroom challenge and the flower challenge and the garbage challenge. It really slowed me down. And then the whole time I'm focused on my surroundings, looking for mushrooms, looking for flowers, looking for garbage, and even shooting video. For me, one of the biggest advantages of having a YouTube channel is it forces me to really be where I am. And I'm looking around me because I'm talking about my surroundings and I'm shooting video of my surroundings, so I'm paying attention to things. And even if you're doing photography, back in the old days, before I shot video, I just did a lot of photography, and you just see everything much more clearly because the video and the photography and YouTube video shooting makes you pay attention to your surroundings. And if you're riding a bicycle, that's the mental attitude you want. And again, my attitude about cycling is, well, you're riding a bike So right out of the gate, you can make a series of assumptions. And I've learned over the years that these assumptions are absolutely true. You're riding a bike, it's going to be physically taxing, it's going to take physical effort, and you're always going uphill and you're always going against the wind. That is cycling. So before you begin a cycling trip, you just have to accept that reality. Cycling is going uphill. Because even if you think a road is flat, in a car it looks flat, there's no such thing as a flat road. Even in the prairies in Canada, which everybody thinks of it as a vast flat plain. I went across it on a bicycle. You're always going uphill. And I say you're always going uphill because that's when you're going slowly, right? You're going 5 kilometers an hour, 7 kilometers an hour uphill for an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours. Then you get to the top of the hill and then you race down the other side in like 2 minutes. So when you add up your entire day, sure, you went up and down in equal elevation. They cancel each other out. Maybe you climbed 4,000 meters, but you also descended 4,000 meters. But in terms of actual cycling, 90% of your time was going uphill. 10% was going down because the downhill goes by so quickly. So in reality, if you're cycling, you're always going uphill. And you're always going against the wind. You've always got a headwind. Because even if there is no wind, you're pushing yourself forward and you're making your own wind because you're going through the air. The air is like a physical barrier that you're pushing yourself through. Anyway, I think that's pretty obvious. So when I hear a cyclist complaining all the time about going uphill, it's like, oh no, look, there's another hill. Why is... You're not thinking the right way because you're always going uphill. And then they go down the other side, and if the cyclist says, oh, this is amazing, oh, wow, this is great, I wish it was always like this, I could do this all day, you're not thinking like a cyclist. And Luke and Naomi, that's basically how they were talking in all of the videos. And I can kind of understand why they're doing it. They may not even be fully committed to that feeling, but because they're making a YouTube video, they're making the adventure more dramatic, more exciting. So when they come across a barrier, like a steep hill, so on the video, they're going, oh man, look at this hill. It's so steep. Oh, this is so hard. Oh, this is so difficult. Oh, there's another hill coming. Oh, why are there so many hills? It's so steep. And then they get off the bike and, oh, it's so steep. We can't even ride our bikes. We have to push. And oh, it's so hot. And then there's a wind. Oh, we're going against the wind. It's so difficult. It's so hard. I kind of understand why they're doing that, because it makes the video sound more exciting. So they're probably not actually as overwhelmed by the difficulties as it sounds like in their video. But that is all they talk about how difficult it is. It's like, oh, it's so steep. And then when they go down the other side, oh, this is amazing, this is wonderful. It's like, oh, the wind. So anyway, it's always hot. It's always uphill. It's just always against the wind. You're basically defining cycling. So you can't fight against those things. You just have to accept that that is what cycling is. And then you have to adjust your mental attitude to you put all that aside. Then you adopt this Zen attitude, like I said. So when I'm riding a bike, what I try to do, and I think I'm very successful at it, I've done it enough that I don't even think about it anymore, to be honest. I love hills. I love mountains. I'd much rather ride my bike in a mountain range than on a flat land, because it's more fun, it's more exciting, there's more variety, and you get better views. So when I'm approaching a long climb, I'm happy, I'm excited, I'm looking forward to it. And when you get to the bottom of the climb, nothing changes, because we're not talking about the difficulty of the climb, You're just talking about the cadence of cycling. The cadence being how many times you turn the pedals in 60 seconds, your cadence. And then all that changes is that when you hit a hill, you start moving forward more slowly, but your cadence shouldn't change. So you're going along a flatter district and you're pedaling like this, and you're going 15 kilometers an hour, 20 kilometers an hour. You hit the hill, you start going up, your cadence stays exactly the same, you're pedaling exactly the same, but you drop down into first gear, and now you're pedaling exactly the same, but now you're moving at 5 kilometers an hour. And then you're just going uphill, and you're going to go uphill for 2 hours, and you just settle into the rhythm. You listen to your breathing in and out, and you don't worry about it. You don't worry about getting to the top. The climb could go on for 6 hours. It could go on for the entire day, and that's absolutely fine. You're a cyclist. That's what you're out there to do. And then you just ride for hour after hour going uphill, and you just enjoy the experience. You enjoy what's around you. But again, part of that attitude is you're not thinking about your destination. You're thinking about where you are. And then Luke and Naomi, again, were very focused on their destination in the whole trip. So they might start the video by giving a summary of how many kilometers we've ridden and how many kilometers are left to do. So mentally, they're already focused on stopping cycling. They want to get to Shanghai so they can get off the bikes. And so it's like a physical accomplishment. And then when they start the day, they talk about, oh, today we have to ride 60 kilometers and to get to this town where we booked a hotel. So in their brain, the cycling is something they're trying to get out of the way. They're just trying to get the cycling over with so they can get to the next town and get off the bike and then get a meal or something. So that's sort of what their videos are like. And it's very different from my attitude and my approach to cycling. But having said all that, they did run into a lot of trouble. I think mainly it's their own choices, I guess. Like riding out of Bangkok at the beginning, very, very difficult. Riding on a major highway system, very, very difficult. And then they crossed into Laos and they turned east. So they went up to Vientiane and then they turned east, turned right basically, and then they're riding along the border with Thailand because they're trying to go directly to the border with Vietnam on the way to Shanghai. And I guess that's more or less off the tourist trail. The tourist trail would take you from Vientiane north through the more beautiful scenery, like the gorgeous limestone cliffs and mountains of Laos, heading north to Luang Prabang and going through Vang Vieng and all the places where most people go. And of course, that is where all of the facilities are for foreign visitors. It's easier when you go that way. There's more hotels, more restaurants, more information in English because they cater to the tourism of Laos. But they went off the tourist trail and now they're in a part of Laos that doesn't see as much tourism. So suddenly they were having a lot of trouble. They couldn't get money. All the ATMs rejected their cards and they didn't have any money. They couldn't find food very easily because there was nothing open, and when they went into these places, they weren't set up for foreigners. They just really couldn't find anything. They had trouble finding hotels, places to stay. And when I was watching their videos, I was sort of thinking, man, I wouldn't go there either because it looked so barren. There were no people anywhere in that part of Laos. They're riding down this highway system, like a road, and there were towns and buildings, but you never saw anything happening. There were no people anywhere. In the fields, outside the buildings, it was like a giant ghost highway. It would look like a very uninteresting area. And what they were doing, of course, was just cycling every day, cycling. So they weren't going off the highway to go explore into the villages and things. They were staying on the main road. And it looked like a very boring place to be riding a bicycle. And even I felt it looking at their videos. I was like, man, I wouldn't want to ride a bike there. It didn't look very interesting. And then when they got to the border with Vietnam, it was interesting that everything suddenly got better. The minute, the hour they crossed the border into Vietnam, from Laos into Vietnam, everything changed. Suddenly, they got money from the ATMs. There were restaurants and cafes. They could get coffee everywhere. And there were people everywhere. Suddenly, all around them, there were lots of Vietnamese people shouting, "Hello, where are you going? Where are you from?" Either in Vietnamese or in English. It was just a much more vibrant, interesting, exciting place. There was such a stark difference. Laos, ghost country. Vietnam, vibrant, interesting life. I really saw it in their video. And I thought, they're going to complete their journey. I thought, they got the worst of it behind them. And now from this point, everything is going to be more interesting now that they're in Vietnam. I thought things were going to get better. But then it started to rain. And it rained heavily, and it rained for day after day after day. They actually went into a hotel, and they hunkered down for 5 days, because every day they were going to wake up and start riding, but then they look outside, and it was still raining. And yeah, I'm all in favor of that. I talk about how when you're cycling, it's always hot, it's always uphill, it's always against the wind. Well, I draw the line at rain. Rain, I don't deal with rain. If it's raining, I don't go outside. Because what's the point of cycling in the rain? Unless you're doing it as a physical challenge and you're trying to get from A to B, you don't have a choice. You ride in the rain anyway. But riding in the rain is just miserable. And if you're a YouTuber, what are you going to film in the rain? And you've got your expensive laptops and cameras and everything, and it's all going to get destroyed by the rain because it gets into your pannier bags. And Luke and Naomi didn't have waterproof gear. Their pannier bags were like the cheapest bags, saddle bags they could get from Decathlon. And I looked at them when they bought them, when they showed them, oh yeah, those are just going to leak like crazy. You can't ride in the rain with those. To do that, you need like Ortlieb pannier bags, like fully waterproof with the roll top closures. And that's the only way you're going to keep the rain out. And that's like most long distance cyclists, they use Ortlieb bags because they're waterproof, and they didn't have waterproof bags. So, but yeah, if I look outside and it's raining, I just go back to bed. I'm like, score. I get a day I can just enjoy where I am, make another cup of coffee, and then do something like this. But they waited 5 days, and it was raining every day. And then finally, they thought, well, we have to go. We can't sit here for the rest of our lives. And thought maybe it's only raining here, and if we get up the road, it will stop raining. So they started cycling, but they rode in the rain all day. And it was absolutely miserable. They had a horrible time. All the words came out: nightmarish, terrible, awful, on and on and on. It was a brutally hard day. And they stopped, I think, after 25 kilometers. They rode in the rain for 25 kilometers, and they just says, nah, this is nuts. And they were worried about their laptops, justifiably so. And they called ahead to the hotel. They made a reservation at a hotel like 70 or 80 kilometers away, and they canceled that. I hope they were able to cancel it and get their money back. And then they just looked for a hotel right where they were. So they quit after 25 kilometers. And then when they got into their hotel room, they unpacked their pannier bags, and they prepared as well as they could for the rain. So they bought garbage bags, like big stacks, like jumbo packs of garbage bags. And then they took their laptops and just put them into a garbage bag, tied it up, inside another garbage bag, tied it up, inside another, tied it up. And then they bought a waterproof like stuff sack, and then put all of that inside the stuff sack and wrapped it up. And even then, water got into everything, got into their bags, soaked everything, but their laptops did manage to stay dry, so they weren't destroyed. But all their clothing was soaked, their bike, their gear covered in mud and dirt. Everything was, it's miserable. I've done it a couple of times in my life where I had no choice. I'm out cycling and I got caught in the rain. I had to keep riding in the rain, and it's just miserable. Your gear just gets destroyed. Anyway, so it was that video where they talked about, I think we're done. Both of them said it. I think this is ridiculous. And they were, in their mind, they were coming up with a checklist of reasons why it made sense to quit. Because they're not enjoying it. It's not a rewarding experience. It's so slow. And now the rain. And the rain is going to destroy our laptops. It's going to destroy our... And they talked about how all their gear is worth like 7,000 euros. And they're risking 7,000 euros of electronics just for this crazy idea of riding our bikes, which we're not even enjoying anyway. So what is the point? And then they were just going to put their bikes on a bus, take the bus to Hanoi, and then in Hanoi, if the weather got better, then they would continue cycling. But if not, they're just done with the bike trip. They were going to call it, right? So that was kind of where the last video of theirs, like a while ago, that I really watched and paid attention to. And then I saw on Instagram that they were already in Hanoi, and they did get there by bike. And then since then, now they've been posting the videos where they did continue cycling and they rode all the way. In terms of the videos, they're not in Hanoi yet. So they were that close to quitting because of the rain. Do not blame them for that at all. And then, yeah, they decided, I guess they got some better weather, and then they got back on the bikes and says, well, let's see how far we can go. And then I guess for me, the next challenge for them is going to be China. And right from the beginning of their journey, I was worried about China on their behalf, because China is the biggest distance they have to cover. Huge country. Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam is like nothing compared to the distance they're going to have to cover. It's like 1,000 kilometers from Thailand to China, and then 3,000 from the border to Shanghai. And my thinking is, well, how long is their visa going to be? From what I've seen online, people have trouble getting visas for China. You can get a 30-day visa, and then you're done. And if they're going to try and cover 3,000 kilometers in 30 days, that's 100 kilometers a day. There's no way. There's not a chance. Some people could do it. Hardcore cyclists would do it. They're riding 200 kilometers a day. But for someone like me, for Luke and Naomi, 100 kilometers, that's a big, hard, long day. And you can't do 30 of those in a row. And even if you could, you're just going to be miserable the whole time. It's just going to be a terrible experience. So I was thinking, if you can't, it depends on your visa. And they did mention that in the video, that when they get to Hanoi, they're going to try to apply for a visa in advance that is longer. And yeah, I wish them luck. I haven't seen a lot of people get one of these visas for 60 days. I think 90 days is impossible for China. And then extending a visa in China is really, really difficult. I followed another cyclist in China, and she just had a heck of a time. And she eventually had to leave China. She wasn't able to cycle there because she couldn't get a visa to stay in the country, and had to give up, basically. So anyway, that's what Luke and Naomi are up to, and the two mad explorers. And we'll see what happens in Hanoi, and then how they get on with their cycling. Yeah, I'm kind of impressed that they haven't had a broken spoke yet. That was the main thing I was worried about. Well, with their bicycles, I was worried about a few things. Their panty bags not being waterproof, and then the spokes breaking and the fact that they don't have gearing for going uphill. So the water, of course, is a big problem. They can't cycle in the rain, not with those pannier bags. They can't go uphill, so they always have to push their bikes uphill, which you can do, which is kind of weird. If you're riding your bike on the steepest hill, you're going as slow as 5 kilometers an hour. And 5 kilometers an hour is almost a walking pace. So like when you get off your bike, which I have done in the past, I've had to do it as well, on really steep sections, you get off your bike and you push it. When you're walking and pushing, you're going at the same speed as you were cycling. So in fact, it doesn't really take longer to push your bike, but it is really hard to do. It's more difficult than riding. Pushing all that weight up a hill is really, really hard. It's really awkward. Anyway, so all of those things are turning out to be true. Their pannier bags aren't waterproof. They have to push their bikes uphill. And they've had flat tires, but so far, no broken spokes. And I thought for sure they were going to get a lot of broken spokes on those bikes. And I thought that was going to be their biggest problem, in terms of the technology. So far, no spokes have broken. So maybe the load they're carrying looks pretty light. But again, Luke is a pretty big guy. I think he stood on a scale at one point, because they also talked about how they wanted to ride their bikes to lose weight. They wanted to get in shape and lose weight. And then Luke was talking about this, and at one point he stood on a scale, and he showed it on video very briefly. So you couldn't really see the numbers, but a guy like me, of course, I'm pausing the video and then going frame by frame, and it looked like he weighed something like 230 pounds. Up in that range, like over like 230, 240 pounds. So yeah, he's a big, heavy guy. And all that weight on the rear wheel, plus their luggage, I thought the spokes would snap like spaghetti with all that weight on the rear wheel, because they're not touring bicycles that they're using. But so far, the spokes haven't been breaking. And they've been on pavement too. So they haven't been going over bumpy roads. And it's the bumpy roads that break your spokes. And going uphill breaks your spokes, because when you have a lot of torque on your crank system, on your gear system, you've got this huge sprocket on the rear wheel, and it's being pulled in a circle, and it puts torque on the wheel sideways, and it puts pressure on the spokes and will snap the spokes and even break the chain when you put too much pressure on it. But so far, they haven't been riding uphill. They've been pushing their bikes uphill. So the chain isn't putting this kind of sideways torque onto the spokes. So maybe that's why they haven't broken yet. And they've been on smooth roads. Because spokes also break when you go over a bump, over a pothole. That'll snap the spoke. But so far, they've been lucky. No broken spokes. And who knows, maybe they'll get lucky all the way to Shanghai. And if they do, yeah, I'll be pretty impressed with those bikes, that they made it at all. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. My next YouTuber vlogger story ties in nicely with Luke and Naomi, the two mad explorers, currently the two mad cyclists, because this is another cyclist who just appeared in Malaysia, beginning a cycling journey from Singapore all the way back to Europe, essentially. His name is Bernardo Bacalhau. Bernardo Bacalhau. It's a Portuguese name, and Portuguese is so difficult. I'll just call him Bernardo, because that I can say. But he posted a video. It's called Episode 1, Cycling Across Southeast Asia. And he calls himself a filmmaker and storyteller based out of Portugal. And I was very excited to see this video when it popped up, because I know this guy. I'm aware of his YouTube channel from before. I posted something on Patreon about him, a little story about his video and his cycling journey. So I'm repeating here some of the things I said on Patreon. But I came across him first because he was in India, and then he came to Malaysia intending to get a new visa to return to India. So he came here basically on a visa run, and he went to the Indian embassy here in Kuala Lumpur to apply for a 6-month tourist visa to return to India. And then when he got here, he was told, we can't give you one of those. In order to get that 6-month visa, you have to apply from your home country. So his trip to Kuala Lumpur, from that perspective, was a waste of time. And but while he was here, he decided, of course, to shoot some video. And I think he just shot one video about Kuala Lumpur. And he's a very professional sort of dude. He calls himself a filmmaker. So that gives you an idea that he's interested in polished, professional filmmaking. When he was in Malaysia, to be honest, his camera was not as professional as what he has now. I notice it's very, very poor stabilization. His video is like jumping and bouncing around all the time, very narrow. I don't know what he was filming with at that time, but he did have a drone, and he shot some beautiful drone footage of Kuala Lumpur, the skyline, all the skyscrapers and things like that. And so I remember him from that video, and then I watched a whole bunch of other videos from his channel, and he continues this policy of being more of a cinematographer and a filmmaker, which is again very different from the way I approach YouTube. So he doesn't focus on the nitty-gritty details of normal life. He likes to show the best of and show things in the best possible light while sort of ignoring the day-to-day difficulties or the little things of life. And of course, I prefer the little things approach. So, but he has a really nice touch, because normally when I see someone who's doing like filmmaking for a travel video, I'm a bit impatient with them, because that's not how I relate to travel experiences. I don't want somebody to go to Paris and make Paris look like the most amazing destination on the planet by careful editing and censoring. I prefer the story that shows their experience exactly how it was. So there you are, a normal human being from Canada, and you want to go to Paris. I want the whole story, getting the visa for France, and how much does that cost? How difficult is it to get? How annoying is it to get? How long does it take? And then the horrors of flying to Paris and then going through immigration and customs and figuring out how to change money and how to get from the airport into downtown and finding a place to stay. And I mean, most of that, from my point of view, from a travel point of view, is all interesting and worthwhile, but there's no question it's awful at the same time. It's tiring, it's exhausting, it's annoying, it's stressful. So but if you show me all of that in a video, I enjoy it, because I want to feel like I'm going with the person to Paris. I want to feel like I'm going through all the stages with them. But most people will open their video with an amazing sunrise behind the Eiffel Tower, and then the next minute they're sitting at a little roadside cafe chewing on a perfect croissant and sipping on espresso, and welcome to Paris, the city of love. And they show you this curated, distorted view of how amazing Paris is. So normally I don't have any patience for that. But Bernardo, he does that. He ignores all the nitty-gritty little details, and yet he's got a nice light touch with the way he does it that I don't even notice. He manages to jump from video sequence to video sequence in a way that's very casual and yet keeps flowing very nicely. He's got musical bridges between all the different sequences, all the different clips, and he's sort of a natural, easygoing storyteller. So even his first video in Malaysia, as much as I thought was absent from the video, and I really felt their absence, I still enjoyed the video because he has a very nice light touch. And I was amazed when I finished watching the video. To be honest, at the end of it, I was like, I wanted more. For example, he was in Singapore, But the video began with him riding his bike out of Singapore. And he said something like, "We're finally leaving Singapore." And I was like, "Oh, finally leaving? Sounds like you had a lot of adventures in Singapore. You were there for a long time. How come none of that is in the video?" So that was my first thought. And then he left Singapore, and the entire video covered, I don't know, a week, maybe 2 weeks. I don't know how long he was on the road, but the entire journey from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur in one video that's about 25 minutes long, something like that. Anyway, it's a shorter video than a Planet Doug video. And I was like, how in the world can you cram all of that into one video? So I felt like he left out so many things that I wanted to see. But I was amazed at how much he managed to include, because he's got this one short video, and he included Singapore, starting his cycling journey, crossing the border into Malaysia, spending the night in Johor Bahru, spending the night with a Malaysian family in their house. They hosted them for a night and gave them a meal and a place to sleep. I think he went to palm oil plantation, and he showed the palm oil plantation, and talked about the tree and the fruit and getting palm oil. He went to the southernmost point of Malaysia on a peninsula to begin his journey there. He went to the forest city and spent the night there, that giant ghost city, this huge apartment complex cost $100 billion for China and the Malaysian government to build, and nobody lives there. He went there, and then he went to Malacca. He tried durian. He went all the way to Kuala Lumpur. All of that in one short video. I was like, how in the world? Like me, I would make an hour-long video about trying durian. I mean, having durian to me would be like a full video. So how in the world did he manage to put all of that together? So I admire that very much. And of course he did it because he's just got a light cinematic filmmaking touch with his video clips and how he puts them together. And you jump from moment to moment quite effortlessly. He did a really nice job with that. But of course I did. In my Patreon description, I was thinking, well, you were in Singapore for 5 days, showed nothing about Singapore geography, history, culture, language, food, music, people, experiences, like nothing at all. So that's kind of disappointing. And then he crossed the border into Johor Bahru, fascinating city with an immense amount of history tied into the history of this entire region going back centuries. But he showed nothing of Johor Bahru, talked about nothing to do with the city. His only content from the entire city was how the sink in his bathroom in his hotel was leaking. So that's the only thing he included about that entire experience. Same for Malacca, nothing about the history, nothing about anything. He didn't do anything in Malacca, didn't go to any of the famous attractions, all he did there was show a little bit of one street, eat some durian, and then they left. On and on and on. So he really didn't show anything. And then I could go way back in time because he didn't show planning the trip, getting the bicycles, buying the cycling gear, assembling everything, flying to Singapore, putting the bike back together, like all of the behind the scenes adventures, getting visas, getting food, places to live, etc., etc. He didn't show any of that. So from my point of view, they're not really the kinds of video telling stories, like video storytelling videos on YouTube that I would seek out. I want something a bit more nitty gritty and day-to-day life, things like that. But anyway, that is Bernardo. And it's an interesting connection with Luke and Naomi, because I mentioned that Luke and Naomi bought the cheapest bikes they could find that are very, very poor touring bicycles. Everything they're using is the cheapest and not very high quality. But Bernardo and the woman he's cycling with, I assume she is his girlfriend, but that never really comes up, but I assume she is. but they are cycling on the best bicycles money can buy, and all of their gear is the best money can buy. So really high-end Ortlieb pannier bags that are fully waterproof. Their cameras are the best. I think he's using like a Sony a7S III full-frame camera and an Insta360 X4, the newest, best version, and then the DJI Action 5 Pro cameras, I think. Anyway, he's got the best of everything. And when you look at his bicycle, it's a Surly Bridge Club bicycle. The best pannier racks money can buy. The gearing on it is perfect. Everything about the bicycle is absolutely perfect. And I'm sure his laptop is state of the art. The latest MacBook M4 powered powerhouse, who knows? So that's very, very different from Luke and Naomi. And when you look at his bike, as I said, it looks so neat and tidy. He's carrying a lot of gear, but everything is small and compact. He didn't buy big pannier bags. He bought the smallest ones that Ortlieb makes. And then he has a drone on top of that. So where he puts all this gear, I don't know. He's got an MSR Hubba Hubba tent, which is like a $500 tent, and on and on and on. So it's a big contrast with Luke and Naomi. An interesting thing with Luke and Naomi is that if they did quit cycling because of all the rain, at least they wouldn't have lost much money. It's not like they invested $10,000 in their bicycles and gear. They basically spent almost like next to nothing. So even if they just gave their bicycle away and got on a bus, they wouldn't be losing any money. But people like Bernardo and his girlfriend Jewel, they spend a lot of money on their gear. So yeah, I think that's the only video they've posted, and since then I think they've left from Kuala Lumpur and they're already cycling north, but they haven't posted a video about that. They also have a Substack, which is interesting. So he doesn't have a Patreon account, but in parts of Europe and the United States, Substack is quite popular. It's like a subscription service for weekly or monthly newsletters. So it's kind of like Patreon, but it's mainly for, like, you write a story with pictures and things like that, and you send it out to your subscribers. So that's where he puts all of the behind the scenes content. And I signed up for his Substack as just a free member, but I can see some big pieces of writing on their Substack. But I don't know if they're posting enough content to make subscribing and paying worthwhile. I don't really know about that, but I signed up as a free member. So now in my email inbox, I get weekly newsletters from them. Jewel, she wrote the first one, and she explained why they don't have any video from Singapore. Apparently, Bernardo got really, really sick to his stomach, I think. So he didn't have, and that kind of gets into the filmmaking side of things, because if you're basically just a YouTube travel vlogger and you get really, really sick, well, that's part of the story. You film being sick, but he wants to produce a polished film. So when he got sick, it meant he could not go outside and shoot his polished video. So he was in Singapore for 5 days being sick, but his sickness prevented him from doing cinematography. So that's kind of the difference there. So he has no video at all of his time in Singapore. But from my point of view, when I read their newsletter from Singapore, all the information in the newsletter, that's the video I wanted to see about. He stayed with some local people in their house and met the whole family, and they took them out and they had all these amazing meals, and he was really sick to his stomach, and they did this and they did that. All these things that they did in Singapore, those are the videos I want to see. But from his point of view, they're not filmic, they're not cinematic enough. So he just put his cameras away and he didn't bother filming until he felt better. So we'll see what the videos are like in the future for Bernardo and Jewel. next video in Planet Doug's YouTube vlogger stories is by a vlogger calls his channel Travel with Ben. And I'm not talking about this video because it's good. I'm not talking about it because he's a super popular mainstream sort of travel vlogger that everybody knows. No, I'm just sort of talking about the video because it's like one of the worst Batu Caves videos I've ever seen. And I'm a little bit of a connoisseur of Batu Caves videos. I have this thing that I call the Batu Caves Challenge. So like if a YouTuber comes to Malaysia and they make videos about all the regular places, they always go to Batu Caves, and then I judge their video from a Planet Doug point of view, and I give them a failing or passing grade. That's the Batu Caves test. And it's not a hard test to pass. I mean, to get a passing grade, you don't have to do very much. All you have to do is know a little something about Batu Caves before you start babbling about it and make your video. You know, you have to know that the statue is Lord Murugan, and you have to know who Lord Murugan is, so the significance of the place. You have to know something about the Tamil people and their connection to the temples here and the Tamil district of India. That isn't really that hard to do. And to pass the test, you can't make a huge deal out of the 272 steps. I mean, you got to have a little bit of pride, because climbing up 272 steps is not a big deal. We're not talking about climbing K2 here. So if somebody, a young person in their 20s, early 30s, is like huffing and puffing and making a huge deal of, oh, I made it to the top, you fail the test right out of the gate. You can't do that. And you have to know that the monkeys are macaques, the type of monkey they are. At least take the time to Google them, and don't just say, oh, monkeys. Find out that they're macaques. Then you pass the Planet Doug test. That's just like a bare passing grade. And if you want to get an A or an A+, then we've got to go quite a bit further than that. But nobody ever gets like an A on their Batu videos test. On their Batu Caves video. And this guy, his video was called Kuala Lumpur's #1 attraction was disappointing, with a big exclamation mark. And I think I also wanted to talk about it not because the video was so terrible, but because I was so disappointed in the YouTube comments. People on YouTube, everybody is way too nice. I don't know when everybody became so nice and so polite. I miss the old days when if somebody said something dumb in a video, people called them on it in the comments. But nobody does anymore. And I was talking about this on Patreon, I think, and then somebody left a comment there teasing me and saying, well, you are aware that they delete all the negative comments, right? That's what YouTubers do. And of course, I'm aware of the ability to do that. As a YouTuber, I can moderate all the comments on my YouTube videos. I can delete all the negative ones. I can keep all, but obviously I don't. But I don't think many people do. Like when it comes to Luke and Naomi and their cycling videos, and Luke was talking about how he's keeping a list of all the negative comments and he's going to throw it back in their face when he gets to Shanghai. I scan all the comments on all their videos. I never see anything negative. There might be the slightest hint. Somebody who might give them advice and say, you know, those bicycles you bought, they're not really suitable for touring. Maybe you should have bought this. Or, you know, your pannier bags, they don't look waterproof. You should have bought Ortlieb. Something like some sort of a helpful suggestion. I see those comments, but those aren't negative. They're just giving help, telling them maybe what they did wrong. Or they might say, yeah, I don't think you're going to make it to Shanghai because of visa problems, or the mountains are going to be too steep, or something like that. But I hardly see any of those videos, so I never see negative comments. And this person on Patreon said, well, that's because Luke and Naomi, they delete everything that's negative, and they do that to make their channel more popular. But to be honest, I don't think YouTubers do that. They really don't. Not to nearly the extent that people might say they do. I mean, I've noticed it on, say, Itchy Boots videos. I'm always looking for anything, any kind of negative comments. Out of the thousands of comments that her videos get, like 0.001% of them is going to have anything remotely critical in it. It's incredible how positive the comments are. And I think what happens occasionally on YouTube, you'll see someone accuse the YouTuber of deleting negative comments and saying, I left a comment and you deleted it. But then I go looking for that person's comment and it's always there. What happens is the person leaves a negative comment, but then they can't find it. It gets buried. And then they go scrolling looking for it and they never find it again. And they think the YouTuber deleted it when they didn't. I've had that experience myself. I've left comments on videos, usually about camera reviews, things like that. And I'll write the long detailed comment. And then I'll go back to their channel the next day to see if they've replied. And at first I think, oh, they deleted my comment. Where is it? But it's just that it got buried and then I wasn't able to find it right away. So I don't think people delete negative comments. Not nearly as many anyway as people might think. I mean, I know for Planet Doug, I have a list of words that I block. Like I'm not a big fan of profanity and vulgar language, so I put those in a list, and any comment that contains profanity and vulgarity, it gets held back for me to review it, and then I can approve it or delete it. I do have that on my channel, which I think is perfectly normal and perfectly acceptable. But I don't delete. If someone tells me my video sucks and I suck and everything is horrible, I leave it on. It's not like, if you're a YouTuber, I hope you have a thicker skin than that. A comment like that is not going to get to me. It's not going to bother me in the slightest. So I'm wide open to it. If you want to tell me everything that's wrong with my videos, have at it. And I can guarantee you, everything that you say is wrong about my videos and about my experiences and about me as a human being. I've already had those thoughts myself. You're not telling me anything I haven't already thought 1,000 times all by myself. So those comments are not going to get under my skin. They're not going to bother me in the slightest. I barely even notice them. And of course, negative comments are also engagement. So why not leave them up? It means somebody felt enough about your video to actually type out a comment. And from YouTube's point of view, that's a good thing. That's engagement. So anyway, I don't think people delete negative comments. So with this guy, I don't think he deletes negative comments. And I scanned his all the comments, and I don't see anything that's even remotely critical. In fact, everybody is like praising him and his experience at Batu Caves and agreeing with everything he said and then taking it further, which is really quite interesting. So what was wrong with his video from the Planet Doug perspective? Well, it starts with the title. Batu Caves was disappointing. And to me, the word disappointing is like a red flag that you went there with the wrong attitude. I was writing recently about a video from Jo Fen. I put that on Patreon as well. A woman there, an American designer who makes like design videos, but she also posts sort of travel vlogging videos. She went to a tourist town in Taiwan called Jo Fen, and she posted a very long video basically saying it's just a boring tourist trap. And she's telling everyone there's better places to go. Like, don't bother going to Jo Fen. And she was disappointed in Jo Fen, but from my point of view, it was her attitude that was wrong. If you're going to go to a place that is popular for visitors, you have to meet that place halfway. All it means really is that maybe you have to work a little bit harder to have a good experience there and see what is interesting about that place. If you go there, as I think Ben did, Travel with Ben, I noticed on his channel, he makes a lot of cruise videos. So that's sort of his attitude. He signs up for a luxury cruise, and then he goes onto the boat as sort of a tourist, and he's expecting to be wowed. Like, his job is to show up. And then it's the cruise company's job to make his experience wonderful. So that's how he views, that's the lens through which he views the world. And he came to Kuala Lumpur, not on a cruise, I don't think, but he was in Kuala Lumpur, and he was researching where to go, what to do. And every list, he said, put Batu Caves as number one. That's the number one attraction in Kuala Lumpur. So he went there, took a grab. He went early in the morning. He didn't want to be there when it was crowded or busy. So he went there before dawn, took a grab to go there. And then his whole attitude seems to be, okay, my job is done. I'm here, Batu Caves. Now amaze me. And he just waited to be blown away by Kuala Lumpur's biggest tourist attraction. And that whole approach has so many problems in it. The one I already mentioned, that he needs to meet it halfway. You can't just show up and go, amaze me. And part of that problem is he was thinking of Batu Caves as a tourist attraction. That the tourist attraction is trying to make money from tourists. Therefore, it's their job to make it attractive to tourists. But that's not Batu Caves. Originally, of course, Batu Caves is an astonishing cave complex, hundreds and hundreds of millions of years old. It is really a natural wonder. So for you, as a visitor, you have the privilege of seeing this incredible natural wonder, and it's like 5 kilometers away. You can get there by grab. You can ride a KTM commuter train, and it has a stop right there. So that's part of what you're there for. And it's not a tourist attraction. It is a temple. It is a place of worship for the Tamil people and followers of devotees of Lord Murugan. That's what it is. It's not originally and mainly a tourist attraction. Sure, tourists go there because it is beautiful and it is interesting, but that's not primarily what it is. There's no entrance fee. They're not charging you $30 to go into the Batu Caves and ride the Batu Caves train, and like a Disney World experience where you're, okay, here I am now, as Nirvana puts it, entertain me. That's not what it is. It's a site of worship, and it's a natural wonder. So that's what you should be thinking about when you go there. And he went on and on and on, giving advice to people, saying, you gotta go there early. Oh man, you gotta go early. Avoid the crowds. Avoid the tourist trap. Later on, the tour groups will start to show up and it's gonna get so crowded. You gotta go early, on and on and on. And he did go early, before dawn. But as far as I could tell, he did nothing to take advantage of being there early. I think he showed up. I think sunrise these days is around 20 after 7. And I think he left at 8 or 8:30. So he was there before sunrise, but then he hardly spent any time there, and he was already leaving by 8:30 in the morning. And he didn't really get any benefits from being there so early. In fact, I would argue that he missed out on a lot because he went there so early. The place wasn't really awake yet. I mean, you would go there early if you were approaching Batu Caves on its own terms, right? Let's say you wanted to go there to appreciate it as a natural wonder. Okay, go there at 5 o'clock in the morning when it's quiet. Nobody is there. You're listening to the birds and you're thinking about it as a 400 million year old cave system. And then you're there watching the sunrise. Yeah, go there early to have that experience. But he didn't do that. He basically showed up, walked into the cave and went, what's so amazing about this place? And then he left. And because he was there so early, he didn't see any of the macaques. And the macaques are one of the big attractions of Batu Caves. It's like a natural thing that a lot of foreigners, like casual tourists, a lot of them, it's the first time in their life they've ever been this close to a wild macaque, a wild monkey. And it's a really incredible experience because he was there so early, he went all the way up to the top. And of course he made the dumb Rocky joke, which shows me that his mindset was not in the right place. When you're at the bottom of the 272 steps and you're already thinking about Rocky and running up to the top and then dancing around because you conquered the 272 steps of Batu Caves, your mind is not in the right state. And he did make a Rocky joke. So he goes up there, and then he goes up, he wanders around the cave, goes, I don't see the big deal. And then he left, but he never saw the macaques because they were still sleeping in the jungle. They were all up in the cliffs in their homes. The macaques don't come out until the people arrive. And they have that habit, of course, because when all the big tours groups come, then all these people are going up and down and they have snacks and they have drinks. And then the macaques can get bananas from these people and steal their drinks and steal their snacks. So then the stairs will be filled with macaques. And he missed all of that because he was there too early. And from my point of view, when you go to a place that is a very popular tourist attraction, the other tourists are part of the attraction. They're interesting to watch. Like if you go to Jiufen in Taiwan and you go on a weekend, on a Saturday or a Sunday, and you go down Old Street, it's going to be jammed with people. It's going to be so crowded, you can hardly even move. And you're surrounded by hundreds of people and they're all taking selfies for Instagram, for Facebook, whatever they're doing. And you can go into that situation and be disappointed and go, oh, look at all these tourists. I'm a traveler. I'm not a tourist. I don't like rubbing shoulders with all these selfie-taking tourists. But the thing is, the vast majority of those tourists at Batu Caves, at Jiufen, they're local people. They're Tamil people, they're Indian people, and they're there because Batu Caves, the temples dedicated to Lord Murugan, are a big religious attraction. And then you, as a Westerner, this guy, he's from the UK, I guess, and for me as a Canadian, I go to Jiufen, I'm there with hundreds, if not thousands, of Taiwanese people living their lives and having a day out with their family and their friends. So for me as a foreign visitor, Jiufen is interesting, Batu Caves is interesting, the Murugan temples are interesting, but the local people are equally interesting. Go talk to them, say hello, ask them where they're from. Well, tell me about this place, tell me about Lord Murugan. So this Ben, Travel with Ben guy, he worked so hard to avoid Batu Caves when there were any other people there. And then because of that, he missed out on the real experience of being at Batu Caves, the other people watching the devotees of Lord Murugan, climbing the steps in their bare feet, giving offerings at the temple. So what is this attitude about going as early as possible and leaving before anybody else gets there? Why avoid other people so much? Other people are part of the attraction of being there. And as I said, going there early can give you a unique experience, but he didn't even take advantage of that unique experience. He never sat down in a quiet corner to absorb the darkness and the quiet and waiting for the sun to rise and appreciating where he was. He didn't do any of that. I think the only reason he went there early was as a bragging point for his video. It's like, I went early before the crowds. And this is some sort of an achievement, like a feather in your cap. I went there when nobody else was there. But the weird thing is, when he was leaving, he already talked about how all the crowds are showing up. And then he was filming himself with Batu Caves in the background. And then he said, look, I'm so happy I came early to miss the crowds. Look at it now. Look at all the people, the huge crowds of people. There's so many people around me. And I'm looking in the background of his video. And I guess I've been to Batu Caves a lot, and I've seen real crowds there. And what he was showing on his video was just a sprinkling. There were like 20 people in the background. Some tourists who were there taking pictures, some who were there as devotees of Lord Murugan to visit the temples and make offerings. There was like nobody there yet. So I don't know what he was talking about. He was doing the selfie videos. Like, look at the huge crowds. It's getting so crowded already, all the tour groups. And I'm looking at the video like Sherlock Holmes. I'm like, look, what are you talking about? There's nobody there yet. What tour groups? I didn't see anything that he was talking about in the video. And inside the temple, like inside the cave, he climbed up to the top and then he went inside. He had some very weird attitudes up there as well, which made it one of the worst Batu Caves videos I've ever seen, where he was looking at the temples inside Batu Caves, and he was disappointed in it as a tourist attraction. It's like, I don't see the big deal. I don't get this place. But then he's looking at the temples, and he's looking at the massive cathedral of the caves, and his idea was, they should have made the temples bigger. It's like, why did they make the temples so small? He was saying, he was looking at one of the temples, and he's like, wow, they could have made a much bigger temple in here. Why didn't they fill the whole cave with this huge temple? They could make it bigger and taller and taller. And again, I was thinking, like, well, why would you do that? And why would you even want that? For me, the Murugan temples are the perfect scale for this cathedral, this cave cathedral that they're inside. They're nicely balanced with the natural environment. And why would he think a good thing to do was to make these temples 10 times bigger and fill the whole cave with more and more temples? And I think it was because he was thinking he was on a cruise ship. Like, I've paid my ticket, I climbed on board, now amaze me as a tourist attraction. And he wanted to be amazed by the scale and the grandeur of the temples. And again, I think he just completely missed the point of what Batu Caves is, and the temples and the natural environment. He just did not get it at all. Oddly enough, as far as Batu Caves, the Batu Caves test goes, he still might even get a passing grade, because unlike a lot of videos that I've watched, he knew the name Lord Murugan, and he knew it was a Hindu holy site. And that's actually much better than most of the visitors to Batu Caves. And he was walking around with Wikipedia open, so when he was talking about the history of the place and Lord Murugan, and he knew the statue that was Lord Murugan, and he knew that the temple, the original Lord Murugan temple, was built there because the Tamil trader, I'm not sure he knew it was a Tamil trader, but it was a Tamil trader who looked at the opening of one of the caves on the inside, and it looks like a spear, and it made him think of Lord Murugan's vel, the holy spear that was given to him by Parvati, his mother, that he used to defeat the demons. And he knew a little bit of that story, but of course he was reading it off of Wikipedia. While you could see he had the camera here, but he was looking off to the side and reading from Wikipedia to do it. But he was making an effort, and he knew the name Lord Murugan. So from that point of view alone, And he did call them monkeys. He did know they were macaques. And he did make the Rocky joke about the 272 steps. And he made a big deal about huffing and puffing to get up the steps. So I don't know. I probably would still give him a failing grade. But at least he knew the name Lord Murugan. And he looked up the history of the temple. And he knew the statue was like 42. It's either 41.7 meters high, 42.7 meters high, or something like that. So he knew a little bit. So I have to give him that. But then when he went on to talk about how disappointing it was as a tourist attraction, his main point was, and these are his words, the place is filthy, disgusting, full of garbage. And I was looking around in his video, and again I was thinking, like, what are you talking about? Because there was one point, again, he was talking about all the crowds, and he was doing his summation, his conclusion, like, why is this place so disappointing? And he's taking the video, showing everything around him, and he says, yeah, this place is filthy. There's garbage everywhere. Look at this place. It's disgusting. Why would they do that for a tourist attraction? Don't they want to attract tourists? To attract tourists, they better clean this place up. And I'm looking at that video, and I'm looking. Try as I might, I don't see any garbage anywhere. Like nowhere. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I need a full 4K high-def widescreen TV and get a magnifying glass, but I didn't see any garbage anywhere. So I don't know what he was talking about. I don't know what he was looking at. So he's going like, look at this place. It's filthy. There's garbage everywhere. Why don't they clean it up? And I'm looking and looking. Where do you see all this garbage? And in fact, in that sequence of video, all I saw were garbage containers. Big, brand new, the big green ones with wheels and a lid. There are like 3 or 4 of them in a cluster over here, 3 or 4 of them in a cluster over there. They look to be full of garbage, but they're all in the garbage containers and the lids are closed. So I'm like, well, what I see in your video is completely contradicting what you're talking about. Look at all the garbage. And I'm like, well, I don't see any. I see some garbage containers. That's where everybody put the garbage. I have no idea what you're talking about. And then he went on to be disgusted by the people who were in bare feet. And of course, at many temples, at a Hindu temple, at Buddhist temples, it's required to remove your shoes and go in barefoot. It's part of the tradition. It's part of the traditions of worship at these temples. So devotees of Lord Murugan, they remove their shoes and they go up the stairs into the temples in bare feet. That is perfectly normal. But he was looking around and he was going, and what makes all this garbage and filth even worse is look at all these people walking around in bare feet. Oh, it's so disgusting. And I don't know, like, where are these words even coming from? And then again, I was looking in his video and he was talking about all the garbage. I couldn't see any garbage. Now he was talking about all these people in their bare feet. And I'm looking at the video. Everybody was wearing shoes. Most of the people in the background were tourists, were visitors. And they were all still wearing shoes because they were below the steps. You're still allowed to wear footwear there. So I'm looking and looking in the video. It's like everybody's got shoes, sandals, and boots on, just about everybody. And at one point, in another section of video, it's like, oh, there's a little group, Indian people in traditional Indian clothing. The women were in saris. They're clearly there visiting it as a place of worship. And they were in, even though they were below the stairs, in the public area where you're allowed to wear shoes, they were in bare feet because they were either about to go up or they had just come down. And those were the only people in bare feet that I even saw. And of course, like, who cares that people are there in bare feet? It is a Hindu holy site. You're supposed to remove your shoes. So what's the big deal? And I guess he was offended because there's garbage everywhere. And look at these people walking in the garbage in their bare feet. And again, I didn't see any garbage anywhere. So I have no idea what he was on about. He went into one of the temples at the side, like below the steps, and it's another temple complex outside the caves. And he went in there, and then he was taught, it was a beautiful place, like brightly colored, beautiful statues everywhere. And he talked about how amazing it looked, beautiful and colorful. But then there was this big drum of some kind. I don't know what the drum was for. It's like a big cement round container. And then he went on in video about, look at this temple. It's so beautiful and so bright and so clean, but look at this. And then he aimed his camera inside this drum, and inside the drum was some garbage. And he says, look at that filth, look at that disgusting garbage. I'm like, well, I have no idea what you're talking about. To be honest, it looks to most people probably like a garbage container. Like, I don't know what its purpose was. Like, it wasn't filled to the top with sand where you're supposed to put incense sticks like you would find at a Buddhist temple. It wasn't one of those. So to be honest, I don't even know what that thing was for. But for all intents and purposes, it looked like a garbage container. So it doesn't surprise me that occasionally somebody walking by, a tourist in particular, go, oh, I've got a water bottle here. Oh, there's a garbage container, and they put it in. I can understand a lot of people doing that. So even though this thing may not have been a garbage can, it was not a big deal that there was a little bit of garbage on the inside. And I'm not talking about mountains of garbage spilling out of this thing. I mean, you have to go looking for it. He had to take his camera and put it inside this big drum and aim it at the bottom. Look at that filthy, disgusting garbage. I'm like, what are you on about? And again, I'm going on about this at such length because it amuses me, but it's not because I'm so critical of him and his video. It's also a little bit of, I went to the video comments and I'm looking for people who would call him out on this thing. Like, where is the garbage? And that giant tub, it looks like a garbage can, and there isn't much garbage in it to begin with. Like, what are you on about? And it's a holy temple. People are going to be there in bare feet. But all the comments echoed what he said. They all went on like, yeah, why is that place so filthy? Why is it so disgusting? And those people in bare feet, they're going to be spreading viruses. And so all the comments made just as little sense as the video did. So to be fair to him, and to end the story maybe, he did show garbage in one place that was pretty bad, but he left Batu Caves. He left the Batu Caves complex, and he was outside the wall, and he's walking along the wall where there was all these benches, and it's like a bus stop sort of thing. And then he went on about, look at all the garbage, and there was a lot of garbage along that part of the sidewalk at this bus stop and against this wall. So yeah, fair play. There was a lot of garbage there, more than you'd like to see, but it's not inside Batu Caves. It's on the outside of Batu Caves. It's part of the city. It's a bus stop, and nobody's walking around there barefoot, and eventually it is going to get cleaned up. But his whole thing about the garbage made so little sense to me. I didn't understand it. And the fact that it was so disappointing as a tourist attraction, again, he missed the point completely of what Batu Caves is all about. He went there with the wrong attitude completely. And he was even inside, he criticized so many little things. I'm like scratching my head. He was inside Batu Caves, and it felt like a criticism. He was aiming his camera around, and he said, look, there's like these random statues everywhere. All over the place, you see these random statues. And I'm like, dude, it's a temple complex. Those aren't random statues. Those are the deities of the Hindu religion. Every one of them has a story connected with Hinduism and Lord Murugan. Instead of like, look at all these random statues, find out, like, go up to one of these statues and say, oh, that's Lord Ganesh. Ganesh is the brother of Lord Murugan. you know, like they're not there at random. People didn't just grab a bunch of random statues and stick them up. Like, how, you don't have to be a genius to figure these things out. It was all very, very strange. And while Ben from Travel with Ben was now leaving, and he left so early, he went by the big statue of the monkey god, Hanuman. Hanuman? Hanuman. I don't know how to pronounce it exactly, but he kind of looked up at it and says, oh, look, there's another statue, and I guess there's another cave, but I can't be bothered with that. So, again, that gets back to his attitude. That monkey god statue is there because it's at the entrance to the Ramayana cave, which is another very interesting place to visit at Batu Caves. I think you have to pay to go inside the Ramayana cave, and it tells the story of Ramayana. And of course, the monkey god Hanuman was part of that story, helping out Rama. He's devoted to Rama and was a key part of that whole story. And you can go into that cave and they have the entire Ramayana in visual form from beginning to end. It's an amazing place to go explore, all in murals and statues telling the story of the Ramayana. And if you're going to go to Batu Caves and then go away from it trumpeting on YouTube that, oh, it's so disappointing, and you can't even be bothered to go into some of the other temples and caves that are there, yeah, there's a reason it was disappointing for you. You didn't even try, you didn't even meet it halfway. And I also had problems with his attitude about the monkeys, as he calls them, the macaques, because he'd already gone up to the main cave complex, come all the way down. He'd given all his speeches about how disgusting and filthy and dirty the place is, and the bare feet. He'd already done all that, and he was about to leave, but then he looked up the stairs, and he saw all the macaques had started to appear. So there are all these monkeys there. And then he kind of went out and was like, oh, I forgot about that. I guess he read about them beforehand, but then when he showed up before dawn, the monkeys were still sleeping, so there was nobody there yet. So he went all the way up, all the way down, and he completely forgot that the macaques were part of the Batu Caves experience. But now he was looking up there. But then his whole attitude about the macaques was equally negative. All he talked about was how vicious they were, how dangerous they were. And he was like, oh, I'm so glad I didn't go there when they were there. And he was watching. So, oh, I just saw one steal a bag from this man. And there was no way, I'm not going up there now. There's no way I'm going back up there. Those vicious animals. And give me a break. I have so much I could say about that. Number one, when did men become such wimps? I see this on YouTube all the time. Every time they go up a set of stairs, they're panting before. Like, have some pride. Even if you are tired, you don't have to be so dramatic about it in the video. At least pretend you're tough and you made it up the Mini-Tahan Trail without being exhausted. And then the macaques. Have some pride. Even if you are a little bit scared of monkeys, do you have to be so blatant about it? I don't know, it just strikes me as really weird. When did men stop becoming men? You see that on YouTube all the time. But more than that, the macaques are not vicious. They're not dangerous. They're not going to hurt you. They're not going to bite you. At the absolute worst, if you are careless with something around your neck, your glasses, a camera, and you're holding snacks in your hand, and you get close to some of the macaques that are on the stairs waiting for their opportunity, sure, one of them might jump in your direction and try to grab the drink out of your hand or the snacks. And some of the bolder ones may grab hold of a strap of your knapsack or your purse and try to get it away from you. This happens at monkey temples. This happens at Batu Caves. But they're not trying to hurt you. You don't have to be afraid of them. You just have to show a little bit of common sense. If you look up the stairs and there's 50 macaques waiting at strategic points, well, stop for a second and pat yourself down. It's like, okay, maybe these reading glasses, I should put them away. Maybe I should put my snacks away. And then if I am carrying a snack and there's a big adult male macaque right there, go around it. Like, just sort of try to stay away from it. I mean, common sense and the macaques are not going to hurt you. At the worst, as I said, they may snatch something out of your hands. You may lose your glasses if you're not careful. That's all that's going to happen. But setting all that aside, what about the amazing thing? How many times in a Canadian's life am I going to be at a place where there are 50 macaques, males, females, babies bounding around doing all their macaque things? Very rare experience. I remember my first visits to Batu Caves. I had my original Olympus camera, the OM-D E-M5 Mark I. My own camera was still sort of functioning back in those days, and I had a 75 millimeter prime telephoto lens, which is 150 millimeters in full frame terms. And I spent an entire morning there just taking pictures of the macaques. And again, what a privilege to be able to get photographs of macaques that close and to be able to watch them in kind of a natural habitat and their behaviors. I mean, they're amazing animals. And the best that Travel Ben could come up with was, oh, they're so vicious. I'm not going up there. They're too dangerous for me. It's like, well, Batu Caves was disappointing for you. It's no surprise. I think it's time for you to pack up your bags and get back onto the cruise ship, because this kind of experience is not for you. You better go back to the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disney World and sit by the pool on your cruise ship. I think that might be more your speed, Ben. So I'm being so mean, but I can't help it. That video struck me so dramatically. It's like, what a silly video. What is the point? And then it felt doubly silly because nobody in the comments was talking about any of this. And I do see a lot of these things on YouTube. So I thought I would make an example out of Travel with Ben and his video here about the Batu Caves. Definitely a failing grade from almost every point of view. The one thing he did point out at the very end, which I agree with him about, is he decided to go back by what he called by MRT. Of course, any Malaysian person will tell him, oh, no, that's not the MRT, that's the KTM train. But you got to give him that one. It seems like it's part of the MRT system. But you can leave Batu Caves by train, and you can go there by train. And if you want to get an A+ on the Planet Doug Batu Caves test, you have to go to Batu Caves by KTM train. That's part of the experience. So that's the only way to get an A+ on my test. But he went there by Grab, but he decided to go back by train. But he ran into a problem that they don't accept money. You can't buy a ticket with cash. You have to have some kind of a payment card. That's what he said, and I think it's true. So you have to have a touch and go card or buy it with a credit card or some other cashless payment system. And if you're a tourist who went to Batu Caves and you're just in the country for a week or a few days, chances are you don't have a card. And who wants to use your credit card to buy a $1 subway ticket? That's just kind of ridiculous to do that. At least it seems ridiculous to me. But anyway, it does seem pretty silly that you go to Batu Caves and at the train station, at the KTM station, you can't just pay for a ticket with actual ringgit. It seems like a no-brainer to me that since so many foreign visitors do go to Batu Caves and leave by KTM train, there should be the option of buying a ticket with money. But more and more, of course, the world is becoming cashless. But yeah, that is something that it would be nice if you could pay cash to get a KTM ticket. So I could go on, I think, but I think that is the end of my Batu Caves is disappointing rant from the YouTube video from Travel with Ben. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and one of the most interesting, or one of the podcasts that stuck with me the most over the last couple of weeks, or however long it's been, is another one from RadioLab. RadioLab tends to be my favorite podcast. I guess I have an interest in science and biology, things like that. And they do focus on a lot of stories to do with science and medicine and biology. And this one was quite interesting for me in particular because it's clearly a big story. It's a huge story. There's been documentaries about it, movies about it. Everybody knows about it. It's a big thing. There are books about it. So it's just out there. And I've probably heard of it in the past. I'm sure it has come up. And yet when I listened to the podcast, it was like the first time I'd ever heard it, this whole story. And then I listened to the podcast and I listened to it again. And then there's a BBC documentary in full on YouTube called The Way of All Flesh. So type The Way of All Flesh and the name of this woman that it's about, Henrietta Lacks, or something else about the story, put that into your search on YouTube, and then this documentary will come up. It's really worth watching. It was shot back in '98 and feels like an old documentary, but '98 was not that long ago, and a lot of the people that were involved in the story were even still alive in 1998, so they got to interview them as well. So the podcast itself was called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. And it's on RadioLab, as I said, so you can search for that and listen to the podcast yourself. And Henrietta Lacks was an American living in Baltimore. I think she was born in 1921, and she died in 1951 of cancer. So she only lived 31 years old. And yet, when you think about this story, Henrietta Lacks died in 1951, but in a way, she's still alive today. And in a sense, she is immortal because her cancer cells are still growing in laboratories all over the world. They're still growing and replicating. Her cancer cells are splitting and growing and growing and growing, and they are essentially immortal, and they're used in cancer research, in all kinds of medical research into bacteria, viruses. Her cells are being used for testing makeup, I think the last count, there were 11,000 patents of products created using the cancer cells from Henrietta Lacks. And I've always been fascinated by cancer. I mean, who wouldn't be? But when you think about it, cancer has to be the biggest mystery of the modern era. And when it comes to how long we live, my one regret, the fact that I'm going to eventually stop living, is that I probably won't be around for when they come up with a cure for cancer. I would love to be on the planet when that is finally figured out, because it is going to be such a tremendous thing. And it really hits me because when you think about it, cancer is life itself. It's just the opposite side of the coin of life, because every living creature on the planet, every human being starts out as one cell, one single cell. We all start as one cell. And then that cell divides into two. And then each of those divide into two. So 2 becomes 4. And then 4 becomes 8. And 8 becomes 16. And then as the embryo starts to grow, those cells keep dividing and they specialize. So a whole bunch of those cells keep dividing until you have enough cells to have a human heart, lungs, skin, eyes, ears, hair, whatever. All of life is based on this simple fact of biological cells dividing in half. You have one cell, divides in half, becomes 2 cells, and they grow. Cancer is one of those cells dividing into 2, but then never stopping. Like there's a normal mechanism in our bodies that the cells keep dividing and dividing and dividing until we have enough cells to make a human body. And then as the cells in our body die, the remaining cells divide to replace the cells that die. And it's a balanced process. Cancer is one of these cells starting to divide and then never stopping. The switch, they throw a switch for the cell to divide, but then the switch to stop dividing never happens. And that cell just grows and grows and grows, becomes tumors, and those tumors press on other organs in our body and eventually kill us. So the very thing that makes us alive is the thing that ends our life through cancer. The very process of a cell dividing, which creates life, when it spins out of control, ends life. So from that point of view, cancer is a fascinating topic. It would be great to cure cancer, of course. It would prevent a lot of deaths, a lot of premature deaths, and it would prevent a lot of misery in the world if you could figure out to stop cancer. That's one side of it. But it feels like figuring out a way to stop cancer will be also revealing all kinds of mysteries about life itself, because life is cell division, which we don't really understand how or why it happens. And then if you understand why cancer occurs, that discovery has to be connected with deeper understanding of cell division and life itself in the beginning. So cancer itself is sort of your brain just starts spinning when you start thinking about it. It's a fascinating topic. And every time I see a story about cancer, cancer research, cancer survivors, cancer treatment, I find it fascinating. And the story of Henrietta Lacks is particularly fascinating because, as I said, she was living in Baltimore, born in 1920, and then in 1951, she went into the hospital for checkups because she was experiencing some health problems, and they discovered, this was in January of 1951, she went to the hospital, and by October of 1951, she was dead. And then in the autopsy, they found that there were tumors everywhere in her body. Her whole body was just filled with tumors. And at the Baltimore hospital, there happened to be a Dr. Benjamin Otto Guy. I'll just call him Dr. Guy. He was a researcher, and he was researching cancer, and he was trying to understand cancer cells. So he was trying to keep cancer cells alive outside the body. So if you could keep the cancer cells alive, he could run experiments on them to try and figure out what's causing them to keep dividing and how to stop them. But up until that point, up until 1951, no one had been able to do this. You take the cancer cells out of a human body and they will continue to divide for 24 hours or something like that, but then outside of the body, they die. And Dr. Guy, he was trying to figure out a way to keep them alive. And he would put them in a petri dish. He had a whole special technique in his laboratory, giving them blood from a living rooster or a living chicken directly from the heart. And he would feed the cancer cells this chicken blood and try to keep them alive longer. And then one day, it was a routine thing that every time someone came into the hospital with cancer, they would do a biopsy, and some of that biopsy would go to Dr. Guy, and then he would hand it off to his nurses and his research assistants, and they would cut it up and put it in petri dishes, feed it chicken blood, whatever they were doing, and try to keep it alive. So then one day, his nurse or his assistant gets a sample from Henrietta Lacks. And then she puts it into the petri dish just like normal, does everything exactly the same thing, and then it never stopped growing. The very first time in history this had ever happened in a medical setting, and Henrietta Lacks' cancer cells just kept dividing and dividing and dividing and growing and growing and growing. And they have lots of video in this the Way of the Flesh documentary, or The Way of All Flesh. They have actual video showing these cells dividing, and it's fascinating to watch because it was made in 1998, and then they have video of all of this. And then days would go by, days and weeks and months, years, decades, and now all the way until today, the cells from Henrietta Lacks are still dividing today. Essentially, they are immortal. As long as you keep feeding them, they're just going to keep dividing and growing. And these cells have been shipped out to laboratories, hospitals, everywhere in the world. So now, when you think about it, like in 1998, this was sort of early in the story in a way, but in 1998 they said that if you took all of the cells from Henrietta Lacks' body that were in laboratories all around the world, I think they said it would add up to 400 pounds of flesh. So there's 400 pounds of Henrietta Lacks in laboratories all around the world, and they're all still growing and dividing. And today, in 2025, there are probably a lot more. And they're using these cells to study cancer, to study viruses, every kind of human testing, because when you think about it, a big barrier in medicine is that you cannot test things on humans because it's not ethical. But here we have human cells that are not connected anyway to a human being anymore, but they are in fact human cells, and you can test them, do all the testing you want, and you're not really violating any of these ethical concerns, though there's more to that story that I'll talk about in a minute. So this line of immortal cells from Henrietta Lacks, they're called HeLa, because Dr. Guy, he would name these different strands based on the first two initials of the patient's first name with the two initials of their last name. So Henrietta, H-E, Lacks, L-A. So these immortal line of cells are called HeLa cells. And HeLa was the very first. I believe they've managed to replicate this, so now there are other immortal cells out there in the medical world, but HeLa was the very, very first. And it's an absolutely fascinating story. But what I was hinting at, that there were no ethical concerns, that's not entirely true, because at that time, back in 1951, when this happened, nobody told Henrietta Lacks or her family. They didn't get permission to use her cells. This was just done in the hospital as a routine thing. So they took her biopsy, took the cells, gave them to Dr. Guy, and he started doing his experiments, and then it went on from there. But nobody ever told the family what had happened. So nobody knew that Henrietta Lacks, in a way, was still alive in laboratories all over the world, and that her heritage, her family's heritage, was one of saving lives everywhere. They were making this massive contribution to medicine, and in many, many ways, but they didn't know about it, and of course they weren't getting paid for it because they didn't know about it. But then something very, very fascinating occurred, in that there were other, as I said, other immortal cell lines were being developed, but then something weird happened. All the other cells changed, like there was something different about them. And then they started testing the DNA, and they started to discover that all these other immortal cell lines were transforming into a different line of cells with a completely different DNA. And nobody knew what was going on. This was driving everybody crazy. But it turns out that what was going on is that Henrietta Lacks' cells were extremely virulent, very, very powerful growing cells, and it turns out they could be spread through the air. So in the hospital, cells from Henrietta Lacks were hitching a ride on dust particles, flowing around the hospital and contaminating other samples. And when a cell from Henrietta Lacks went into another petri dishes with cells from another human body, they started to grow and they took over. So all of the petri dishes in the hospital containing growing immortal cancer cells, they all became HeLa line. They all turned into Henrietta Lacks cells. And when they finally figured this out, they had to figure out a way to distinguish between the two based on DNA. So they needed, I don't know why, to be honest, I thought they would have the DNA from the cells themselves, but apparently they needed samples from her family members. So now the family members of Henrietta Lacks were being contacted by researchers and doctors and laboratories and hospitals all around the world saying, can you send us a blood sample? We need your blood sample to get your DNA so that we can distinguish the HeLa cells from other cancer cells. And that's how the family of Henrietta Lacks, that's how they found out what had happened and what was going on. So that's also quite a fascinating story. And that led to how the story spread beyond the world of medicine and science, because the idea is that Henrietta Lacks was black, and the idea is that they didn't tell her family what they had done about taking her cells because they were black and they could get away with it. I mean, to be honest, I don't think it was quite that nefarious. Nobody was sort of doing this on purpose, but it turned out that a black family member, her cells were being used for medical research, and yet the family didn't even know about it and nobody got permission from them. So that became part of the political, cultural discussion of racism in the United States, black versus white. The story went up into the political world because of that, and into the legal world because, of course, her family wants a piece of the pie. I mean, if people are out there making millions of dollars off of cosmetics that were developed because they were testing it on HeLa cells, well, shouldn't we be compensated for that? And that has led to all of the books and the documentaries and the movies. There's even Oprah Winfrey made a movie about this. I can't think of the name of the movie right now, but you can do a Google search pretty easily and come up with it. I haven't seen the trailer for it. I haven't heard anything about it, but I'm pretty sure Oprah Winfrey's movie focuses on the science and the medicine, of course, but also a heavy emphasis on the black-white divide in the United States back in the 50s. And then this fight over who has ownership of the HeLa cells, who do they belong to, and how did race factor into how this developed over time. But yeah, so that is the podcast. What is the name of it again? The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks from RadioLab. But yeah, some of my notes here, some things I forgot to mention, that her cells contributed to developing the polio vaccine. So right there, you've got a huge contribution to medicine right there. Her cells went into space because they wanted to test what would happen to the human body if it goes into space, and nobody knew really. So they had the HeLa line of immortal cells, and they sent them up into space and then did experiments on them, and when they came down from space they could analyze them and see what happened to them. They put them next to nuclear weapons to see what happens to the human body that's exposed to a nuclear blast. So this woman, Henrietta Lacks, in a weird kind of way, she's been a part of so many huge events in human history. Her cells are now immortal and have gone into space, cured polio, experienced nuclear weapon blasts, cosmetic testing, and on and on and on. But yeah, she didn't live very long. Her lifespan of her own was 31 years, but in a way, she's going to be living pretty much forever. So here's the Oprah Winfrey movie called, maybe the film had the same name, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Came out in 2017 with Winfrey in the leading role of Deborah. Oh no, so Winfrey didn't play Henrietta. She played her daughter, Deborah Lacks. And I think, that is the whole story of Henrietta Lacks. And I find it a very comforting thought for some reason to think that her cells are still out there in the world and being used in medical research. And I think, not to get too far into the weeds, I do connect this in my mind with the idea of immortality for everyone, because I've never had this sense of a 100% divide between life and death. So people that go on and on about, I don't want to die, and they make this really, make death into this tragic event, that here's life and then death is horrible and terrible and ends this amazing thing we called life. But from a philosophical and even from a physical, biological point of view, that's a completely inaccurate way of viewing things, because life is a process. It's a cycle, and you can't have life without death. It's exactly the same thing. Like, for me, in my mind, having two separate words, life and death, doesn't make any sense. You should just sort of combine them, because they are the same thing. Living and dying are exactly the same thing, because the second you come into existence, that very first cell, it's on a pre-programmed cycle that it follows, almost like a computer program. It starts dividing, creates the body, it does a bunch of things, and then the cycle reaches the point where it all just comes apart. And that is living. So living and dying are exactly the same thing. So of course, dying is nothing to fear in any way. It's nothing to be upset about. Of course, the manner of dying can always be associated with pain and disease and getting older and weaker. So there can be some physical sides of life ending that are not that pleasant, but it's all basically the same cycle. And I do like to think of that, because even my body will live on forever. And in fact, my body has existed forever, because all the physical material that makes up my body, the actual water that's inside my cells, that's been around forever, ever since the beginning of time, essentially, the beginning of the universe, the beginning of the planet Earth. And this material that makes me just happens to come together in this form for just a little while. And then when that little while, we're done with that, it all comes apart and it all goes off to turn into, my part of my camera gear just fell off the bed. It just goes off and forms other things. And so we are all immortal from that point of view. And I do like that idea. So the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks sort of speaks to me on many different levels. I didn't think about it until just now, but this movie I'm going to mention actually connects with the story of Henrietta Lacks and cancer, because the main character in this movie, God Bless America, one of the many horrible things that happens to him at the beginning of the movie is that he's informed by his doctor that he has a brain tumor. He has cancer and he's going to die very, very soon. It's inoperable. So that's actually part of this movie. And I kind of wanted to talk about God Bless America, not because it's a good movie. In fact, I would say it's quite a bad movie and I don't recommend it at all. But it is something that I watched. And that's the only reason I'm going to talk about it, I guess. So I think it's from 2011. It was written and directed by Bobcat Goldthwait. Bobcat Goldthwait. And it's the story of a guy named Frank, who is sort of a down and outer kind of loser character. A lot of bad things happen to him. He loses his job and now he's terminally ill. And then he essentially goes off on a killing spree because, well, I won't tell the entire story about all the details that lead up to it, but his original idea was just to kill himself. He's quite depressed. He's a very unhappy man. He's going to die anyway, so why wait for the cancer to kill him? Why not just kill himself? But then through a series of circumstances, he decides, well, why don't I kill other people instead? And why don't I go out and kill the worst people in the world? And in terms of this movie, what he's talking about are people that are kind of close to my heart, close to my world, because it was all about the world of like reality TV shows, people on YouTube, meme stars and TikTok stars and YouTube stars, influencers. Like, from his point of view, all of the absolute worst people in the world. Think about the Housewives of Beverly Hills, any kind of horrific reality TV show, that kind of person. He grew to have a great deal of hatred for these people, and he saw them on TV all the time. So he decided, rather than killing myself, why don't I take the time I have left in life and go kill as many of them as possible? And I guess it was a little bit of a political statement. He was fighting back against the direction he saw the world going in, becoming dumber and stupider over time. And he linked up with a high school girl, I think her name was Roxy, and Roxy basically had the same mindset as him, except she also hated all of these reality TV show stars. She hated all the shallowness and stupidity that she saw in everybody around her. And she joined Frank on this killing spree. And basically the two of them went on a joyride around the world, around the United States, killing people and robbing people and stealing cars, and just basically went on a crime spree and trying to kill as many people as possible. So that is the movie God Bless America. So it reminded me of a lot of movies that I think are worth watching. For example, I can never look away when a clip from Falling Down shows up on YouTube. I've watched the movie many times. Michael Douglas, the star of Falling Down. It's a cult classic. And again, it's basically the same story, where Michael Douglas's character is angry at the world, at all of the stupidities of people, and he essentially goes on a killing spree. But somehow in Falling Down, it feels like it has something to say. It feels a little bit deeper. It feels real. It feels like there's something of value in the story of Falling Down. There's something you can relate to. And then there's movies like more extreme Natural Born Killers. Again, a couple there who went on a vicious, horrific killing spree, and somehow that movie felt like it had something to say. Like God Bless America made me think of Idiocracy as well. Essentially, the world that Frank lives in is the world of idiocracy. That's the world he sees around him, which is what inspires him to go around killing people. So that's all well and good. These are the movies that God Bless America reminded me of, but it's really not a good film. It feels weird. Like, I don't know what the movie is trying to say in the end. I'm not sure what the message is. It doesn't feel like they really thought it through. And for a movie like this to work, for its message to resonate, I think you have to identify with the characters a little bit. Like in Falling Down, people love that movie because they can relate to Michael Douglas, where he goes into a fast food restaurant to order breakfast, and he gets up to the front of the line and they tell him, oh, we're not serving breakfast anymore, because he's 1 minute after breakfast time. Like, according to the store policy, they stop serving breakfast at 10:30. And he looks up at the clock and it's 10:31. And right behind the store clerk, the restaurant, he can see all the breakfasts are there. All they have to do is get one and give it to him. And they say no because, oh, you missed breakfast. It's at 10:31. Or like Ricky Gervais. I love the stuff he does in all of his TV shows. They are really, really good. What's his show called? I'm going to have to look this one up because I really want to recommend this show. This one is a great one. I couldn't think of the name on my own. I needed the help of the internet. Afterlife. So that is a British black comedy drama created, written, executive produced, and directed by Ricky Gervais. And I remember watching Afterlife and being very impressed with it. It has 3 seasons, and the basic idea is that this man, Tony Johnson, his life is turned upside down after his wife dies from breast cancer. He contemplates suicide, but instead decides to spend his life punishing the world for his wife's death by saying and doing whatever he wants, regardless of how it makes other people feel. And it's kind of like a superpower that he has. But anyway, there's that show by Ricky Gervais and other things he's done which have similar elements to God Bless America and Falling Down, shows like that. But he does a really good job of it. And I remember there's one sequence, it could be from Afterlife, maybe it's from something else, where Ricky Gervais is in a restaurant and there's a menu and it has like a kid's menu where you can order a smaller portion for a lower price. So he's there with a child and the child says, oh, I'll have the Franken beans with toast or whatever. And then Ricky Gervais's character says, oh, I'll have that too. I'll order. And then the waitress says to him, oh, you can't order from the children's menu. That's only for children. And then Ricky Gervais, he points out quite reasonably, well, the only reason it's cheaper is because the portion is smaller, right? The adult portion is $10 because it's twice as big. The child's portion is smaller, so it only costs $5. But I'm not that hungry today, so I would like to order a small portion. So I would like the order from them. And they tell him, no, that's our policy. You are an adult, so you can't order from the children's menu. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And we all run into those situations 100 times a year in our life, but we can never do anything about it because we're too polite, we're too nice. But then we see these movies that are fantasies, like Falling Down, where he's wandering around with a gym bag of machine guns and rocket launchers. So when he goes in there, they tell him, oh, you can't do that. He just takes out a machine gun and says, what do you mean I can't do it? Which is, yeah, the movie isn't really saying that we should all do this, but at a certain level, we can relate to that frustration, to the character in Falling Down. And then Ricky Gervais, he eventually won the argument with logic because he said to the waitress, oh, okay, well, my daughter, this young girl, she would like to get 2 orders of Franken beans with toast, please, from the children's menu. And then the waitress says, oh, you're just going to eat one of them yourself. And he's like, no, I'm not. There's no rule against this young girl ordering 2, is there? And then the waitress had to agree, well, yeah, there's no rule against that. So she brings 2, and then Ricky Gervais just eats one of them. And, of course, there's nothing the waitress can do about it. So he won without a machine gun. But anyway, I do like those ideas, those sorts of stories. And you can relate to Ricky Gervais. You can relate to the character in Falling Down, Michael Douglas's character. But in God Bless America, I can't relate to this guy because he does not seem very likable, and he seems to be his own worst enemy because the way he comes to the conclusion that everybody is stupid is because that's all he consumes. Like in the movie, all we see is Frank night after night after night sitting in front of the TV watching reality television. Like, I'm pretty sure I would hate everybody in the Housewives of Beverly Hills. Like any one of these, the Housewives of this, I would hate all of those people. They're designed for me to hate them. But I've never watched an episode of the show. I've seen clips, of course, you can't avoid them, but I've never watched an episode. Why would I? But Frank, every night, all night, he just sits there watching the worst game shows, reality shows, news programs from all the dumbest people on the planet. So that's all he consumes. And then when he goes to work, he just seeks out the most shallow people in his office and listens to their conversations and talks to them. So if you find all of this dumb stuff offensive and unpleasant, well, do something else. Like Michael Douglas, his character didn't go out looking for dumb people. He just went to the local fast food restaurant to order breakfast, right? He's not sitting at home night after night just watching the worst that television has to offer and then deciding it's his mission to go out and kill all those people. My advice for Frank would be, well, turn off the TV or watch something better. Television isn't by definition awful. You are choosing to watch the worst shows on television. There's tons of amazing, really good programs on television. Watch those instead. So I couldn't really relate to Frank. And then as the show progressed and their crimes got more and more graphic and they're killing more and more people in more dramatic ways, and I don't know, I didn't really speak to me at all. But anyway, that's the movie God Bless America. With this movie, I guess I'm doing exactly what Frank did, so you can point the finger of criticism directly back at me, because right now I'm in the middle of watching a movie called The Gorge, which is on Apple TV. I think it came out in February, so it's a brand new sort of movie on Apple TV called The Gorge. It stars Anya Taylor-Joy and some hunky movie star, what's his name? Miles Teller, I forgot his name, and Sigourney Weaver. It's a science fiction romantic action film, according to Wikipedia, directed by Scott Derrickson and written by Zach Dean. And these people are unknown to me. I don't know anything about Scott Derrickson or Zach Dean. And of course I know Miles Teller as an actor, and I know Anya Taylor-Joy very, very well. But to sum it up succinctly, the movie is just dumb. It's like one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. And it isn't good either. They tried to mishmash, like I said, science fiction with horror, with action, with romance, with I don't know, it's like everything they could think of thrown into a blender, and they mixed it all up. To be honest, I'd never even heard of the movie at all. I'd never heard of it. I'd seen a trailer, no advertisements, nothing. But then I love to watch a YouTube channel called Pitch Meeting. And in these videos on YouTube, this guy pitches movies, but he does it in such a way that it points out all of the illogical things in the movie, all the things in the movie that make no sense at all, which I'm a big fan of that perspective, because a lot of the big movies, Hollywood blockbusters, they're just so dumb. They don't make any sense at all. There's no logic to them at all anymore. Because all they need to do, put some beautiful people in there, have a lot of explosions, fast cars, chase scenes. Hey, we got a movie. Who cares that none of it makes any sense? It doesn't really matter anymore. People will still pay to watch it. So that's the cynical version of Hollywood. But anyway, on Pitch Meeting, the latest video that he made a video about was the Gorge. And I'd never heard of it, but I watched the Pitch Meeting, and to be honest, it did intrigue me enough that I wanted to watch it, because I'm a big fan of science fiction, of horror, of really extreme situations. And what I heard and saw in the Pitch Meeting reminded me of a lot of movies that I really, really like. So it reminded me of things like The Mist, the Stephen King story. Frank Barabont, Frank Barabont, I think, directed The Mist. And in The Mist, this mist comes into the town, and it opens up a portal into hell, like another dimension that essentially is like hell. And all of these monsters come from this other world and invade our reality. And it's absolutely terrifying and horrifying. And I've always loved the movie The Mist and the book The Mist. I think it's a great story. So there are elements here that reminded me of that. And there's a movie that I don't really like, but there's, one of the King Kong movies, a recent one. I think Jack Black is in it, I think. And in this King Kong, they go to the island where King Kong lives. And on that island, there's one point where they fall into a gorge, I think, into a gorge. And in the gorge, there's all of these monsters that live there. Giant, evil creatures that have evolved, that do nothing but eat and kill. And that situation in that gorge with all these scary monsters looks exactly like the monsters from the Gorge. And I could go on and on and on. And I just watched the TV series about a sniper, The Day of the Jackal, where he's an assassin and an elite sniper. And in this movie, The Gorge, the two characters, as ridiculous as it seems, why can't I ever think of this guy's name? I guess I don't watch a lot of his movies, but the guy, what is his name? I want to say Tyler, Miles Teller, and then the character played by Anya Taylor-Joy, both of them are like elite snipers, like the best snipers the world has ever seen. And one works for the West, sort of on the western side of the political spectrum, and then Anya Taylor-Joy is from sort of the eastern side of things. And they're both the best snipers of the elite snipers. And of course, the fact that these two are the best snipers in the world it's kind of ridiculous. But of course, it has to be those two because we need a romance. So now we have these two snipers on opposite sides of this gorge, and they start seeing each other through binoculars. And of course, to me, this is like the most ridiculous thing in the world. And I talk about this all the time, where in movies, people are put into very unusual situations, like it's the apocalypse. The entire human race has been wiped out, and there's only one man left, you. And you happen to meet the one woman in the world who survived the apocalypse. And wouldn't you know it, it turns out to be Anya Taylor-Joy. Like, same age as you, one of the most beautiful women on the planet, who is also incredibly smart, very intelligent, funny, kind. I mean, she's like the ultimate woman. So there you are, you're like this elite sniper. You're in your 20s, you're a good-looking man in the prime of health, and you take this job that sends you into hell to stand guard at the edge of a gorge filled with monsters. And you happen to look across the gorge, and there's one other sniper there. I mean, we've got a gateway to hell, basically. They present this place, this gorge, contains something so evil, so powerful, that if it ever gets out, it's going to wipe out the entire world. It's going to kill everything on the planet. It's that deadly. That's dangerous. That's how they present it to you. So how do they guard it? The entire human race gets together. Every nation on the planet works together to contain the evils of the gorge. And what do? 2 people. They send 2 snipers to guard the entire world from this thing that can kill everybody. Logically, that's just not how the world works. You'd think, we have prisons where we put people who are convicted of murder and rape and robbery and assault, and every prison in every country in the world has hundreds of staff and dozens of armed guards. And here we have a gorge filled with creatures that can end all of humanity, and we send, let's send 2 soldiers. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculously dumb to start with. But then, of course, on one side, we send a good-looking, intelligent, kind, nice guy on one side of the gorge, and on the other side of the gorge, the only other sniper is like the perfect woman, the most beautiful woman on the planet, who's also powerful and kick-ass and strong and intelligent and nice and on. I mean, it just, what are the chances that that pairing is going to show up? So of course they fall in love, and then we have a romance, and then the 2 of them have to get together to fight the monsters in the gorge. And then when they go into the gorge, this is all in the trailer, so I'm not giving anything away, then the movie gets just more ridiculous. It just spins out of control into one of the dumbest movies you can ever watch. However, dumb as it is, I'm probably going to finish watching it. I have to see how it ends. When I'm watching something this dumb, I can't look away. I just have to watch it all the way to the end and just see how dumb it becomes. Though in a rare moment for me, and this is pretty rare, I fast forwarded through the romance, because it's like, I get it. And then the whole sequence of them, the gorgeous man, the gorgeous woman, looking at each other, and then they start communicating with binoculars, and they write love notes, funny little messages to each other on a big... I didn't need to sit through all of that, because I was just bored. That's not what this movie is for me. For me, this movie is about monsters. Like, I want them in the gorge, and I want them fighting the creatures. So I basically just hit fast forward, and I paused from time to time just so I could laugh at everything. Where yeah, there's one point at the very beginning, I can't think of his name. Miles Teller. Miles Teller's character, he doesn't know the other sniper yet, but he's in his tower, and he gets out his binoculars because he hears a chainsaw. So he looks across the gorge to see, oh, who is the other sniper, and what is this person doing with a chainsaw? And then he's looking through binoculars, and Anya Taylor-Joy, an elite sniper, a kick-ass fighter, the best in the entire world, an elite assassin. She's wearing skin-tight jeans, with a bare midriff, and she happens to be standing with her back to Miles Teller while she's, running a chainsaw, cutting firewood. And then, of course, Miles Teller's like, whoa, who's this? And then when he finally, gets across the gorge to meet up with her, they're going to have a romantic dinner together. And then she comes running up to him, and it's like she's like just stepped out of a top model dressing room, with the perfect makeup and the perfect hair and these huge, gorgeous eyes. And then she walks up to him and says, hi, it's like, just like, oh my gosh, can this movie get any dumber? Anyway, I'm going to watch the rest of the movie and just see how dumb it can get. And the action sequences are absolutely ridiculously dumb. The ones that we've seen up until this point, because we need exposition. So even before the romance can start, we have to establish how dangerous the gorge is. So there is a sequence where they have to fight the creatures from the gorge. And that whole fight sequence is just so dumb that the place is set up like this. As I said, two of the largest economies in the world, basically the United States and the Western Alliance, and then Russia and the Eastern Alliance, they kind of got together, they pooled their resources to contain this threat to humanity, and they both went, let's set it up like this, and we have two people there guarding it, and like a barbed wire fence, and some mines, and a few automatic guns. That should do the trick, right? It's absolutely ridiculous. It is fun. I'll give it that. The gunfire is fun. The creatures are kind of fun. Learning about them is kind of fun. But yeah, one of the dumbest movies you can watch right now. But I am going to watch it. The Gorge. Yeah. So that's it. I think for my pop culture roundup for today. So, the TV series Goliath, it's the last show I'm going to talk about, the last part of pop culture, and I think the last topic for this podcast. I don't have a lot to say about Goliath, but I'm still watching it. I'm currently watching season 4. I'm in the middle of it, or at the beginning of it, and it is going around in my mind a little bit, so I just wanted to get it out of my system. So the first season of Goliath, I've already talked about that, is really good, I thought. I enjoyed it a lot, and I'd recommend it to anyone. I think it's really good television, good characters, good story, a good legal drama, a good mystery, good cinematography. Yeah, and Billy Bob Thornton is the star of Goliath. He's really good. And the thing that really jumped out at me about season 1 of Goliath, it brought all of that to the table, but it was also unusual in the way it presented the villain. As I talked about when I talked about season 1, is that the villain had a little bit of a David Lynchian evilness, creepiness to him. The way he looked, the way he behaved. He seemed completely insane, even though he was the head of a major law firm, and he had physical mannerisms where he used a clicker all the time in conversation. He would just like click it at people, and it was such a creepy thing to do, and I really enjoyed the creepiness of that character. He seemed quite evil, but in a special way. So I admired Goliath season 1. Then I watched Goliath season 2, and it continued that trend, but it seemed to cross some kind of line that I didn't like. It was very dark, but it was dark in a way that was disturbing. And I don't know whether the TV show earned it. Where, I don't mind darkness in a movie or TV show, but it has to fit in. And somehow the world of Goliath didn't seem like it could contain that kind of evil, that kind of darkness. It was like it was mixing two different TV shows together. The legal drama where the small lawyer takes on the evil corporation with all their money and their high-powered lawyers. That's the TV show you're there to watch. But then there's another show happening at the same time, which is just like dark and disturbing in a way that you don't often see. And I'm going to spoil some of the story here, so if you are ever going to watch Goliath season 2, hit stop now and don't listen to me continue. So this is your spoiler warning. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is so disturbing about this show, and I'm going to spoil some of the reveals. So there's your spoiler warning. If you're still here, you wanted to hear me talk about this. And what's disturbing about it is that there are two characters. One of them is a cartel drug lord, like the head of a Mexican cartel. And of course, in modern American movies and shows, things like that, the Mexican cartels are kind of the new boogeyman. like the most evil people on the planet are now tend to be from Mexican cartels, that they're willing to do anything, no matter, the beheading and the torture and the dismembering. They're presented as being quite well known for that. So that's what we have in Goliath season 2. Yeah, season 2. There's the head of this cartel, and he happens also to be kind of an amateur surgeon. And when he punishes his enemies, he gets sadistic pleasure out of cutting off bits of their body. So he puts them on an operating table, keeps them alive and conscious, I think. He definitely did that a couple of times. And then he makes them watch as he cuts through and takes off their legs, shows them their legs and throws them away, cuts off their arms. And then you get to the very end of the show, and one of the bad guys gets his just desserts, which you're supposed to be happy about because you want the bad guys to get punished. But it turns out that one of the bad guys gets taken by the drug cartel bad guy, the Mexican cartel bad guy, ends up on his operating table, and he wakes up and he's missing both arms and both legs. So his legs have been cut off, his arms have been cut off, and he's basically just a human torso lying there helpless. And then the evil cartel leader now says, you can't move, you can't walk, you can't do anything, and now you won't even be able to speak, and I'm going to cut off your tongue. And then he takes a scalpel, and then he's going to amputate his tongue as well. So we're talking some very, very dark stuff. But that's only half of it, because the other half is that this bad guy who was turned into a torso, he happened to have a kink where he was like a billionaire, and then he would keep prisoner. So the Mexican cartel leader would take women, cut off their limbs, and then this billionaire would keep them prisoner inside a room and make them enact stories from his life. And I mean, it's just, I don't even want to talk about it because it's just so disturbing and it's so evil. And for Goliath, it was why? It was too dark. It was too much for this legal drama show. And I kind of understood what they were trying to do. They were trying to do something different, combining different genres, but it was an uncomfortable mix. And I haven't watched season 3, so I don't know what happens in season 3, but then I moved on to season 4, and I've just started season 4, and season 4 is equally weird. I've heard people describe it again as a David Lynchian sort of atmosphere, and I'm not really enjoying it. I may not even finish watching it because I am interested in the legal story, but they're doing it through flashbacks, black and white dream sequences, so you sort of feel like you're watching a Twilight Zone episode or Twin Peaks from David Lynch. It's like Twin Peaks with weird things happening, symbolic things in black and white and bizarre moments, and you're sitting, it feels very indulgent, like it's a project from a film student, first year film student making his first movie, and he's trying to be very artistic and very creative and getting very weird and imitating David Lynch or something. But I don't know, it just feels like it doesn't fit to the story again, and it's kind of boring at the same time. I've never been a big fan of dream sequences. I hate the idea that you're watching something and then the character wakes up and, oh, it was all a dream. It's like, well, if it was all a dream, then why was I watching it? Like, I don't want to watch somebody else's dreams. I don't want to watch something that wasn't real. I engage with a TV show or a movie because I like to imagine that it's real. That's the whole point of TV shows and movies for me. And then if someone goes through this long adventure and at the end of the adventure they wake up in bed, it's like, oh, none of that was real, I was just dreaming. It's like, well, now you've ruined it for me. I do not want to watch other people's dreams. I'm not into the artistic crazy cinematography of creating a dream world that isn't real. I want to see the real world. I mean, it can be a crazy world. You can make the world as weird and crazy, fill it with as many fantastical creatures as you want. That's fine. But I want that world to be real for the characters living in it, if you see what I mean. But in this case, we've got Billy Bob Thornton, who's dreaming up this crazy world, but then he wakes up, and that's the real world for him. That was his dream world. So it's not the same thing. Anyway, I'm not really enjoying season 4 very much either. I'll probably continue watching it because I am a little bit hardcore when it comes to this. I usually watch everything, even if I don't like it, because I like to see how it goes. So that is it for pop culture. Goliath, up to season 4. And that is it for my thoughts for today. As always, I could go on. I have other podcasts, other TV shows, other movies, other Patreon things, YouTube, Planet Doug things. But as always, I've been talking long enough, even for me. So I'm going to shut down here and get started with the rest of my day. So thank you for hanging out with me, and I hope you had this podcast playing in the background and it entertained you a little bit, kept you company a little bit during your day. And as always, I'll see you, hopefully, in the next one. See you then.